Sword of Coming Chapter 12-13. Chapter 12-13. The nest of ants all have the same surname. During the rainy season of the Qingming festival, officials, rich men and women of middle-class families often ride to the graves outside the city to pay respects to their ancestors. Although they are sweeping the graves of their dead, no one looks sad on their faces. Talking and drinking all the way, it's more like an outing. No wonder there are often scholars from other countries in their notes, using this to ridicule the people in the capital of Xuanhuan Kingdom. Pei Qian was going to the city god's temple in the capital, some distance away from the imperial palace in Qingtianjian, so she bid farewell to Gu Ken and Gu Lingyan, and took the lead in secretly sneaking into the capital of Xuanhuan Kingdom. The security of a small country, whether it is the means up and down the mountain, is really not that strict when facing a handful of warriors at the end. However, Gu Ken brought Gu Lingyu to the gate of the city, handed in the certificate, and chose to walk into the capital in a well-behaved manner. Gu Lingyu, who was wearing a mask on his head, covered his mouth with a smile and said, "Let me go to the Qingtianjian, don't worry Lu Xianying, and you too?" Gu Ken said, "Of course Lu Xianying doesn't trust you, but Lu Xianying doesn't care about this, he only cares about me and let me control you." As for what Gu Ken is worried about her, she is very relieved. As long as she does something bad, she will settle accounts according to the rules. Gu Lingyan smiled and said, "He's really interesting." Gu Ken said, "I told you at the wine shop that Lu Xianying has always relied on his intuition to eat. If you think this is a derogatory statement, then there is something wrong with your brain." Gu Lingyan pouted. Gu Ken reminded, "You will enter the Qingtianjian later, hide your body and wait for the opportunity. When you have nothing to do, you can visit the secret library of the Calculation Bureau and the Examination Bureau. An accurate topographic map, all the large and small buildings, special instruments, and the busy work of the officials are all drawn on this map. It is best not to omit anything. You can read and draw while walking, and remember to help copy some secret books in the archives of the old dynasty, focusing on the records of sacrifices, marriages, funerals, auspicious disasters and disasters in the history of Shueshur of Xuanhuan Kingdom, as well as the copies of the upper calendar and the Eastern Palace calendar of each generation. The more the better, I will be useful later." What kind of realm Qin Pingan is pursuing now? Gu Ken roughly guessed a clue. Gu Lingyan asked tentatively, "These are trivial matters, not difficult, but how should I judge something or nothing?" Gu Ken glanced at the female cultivator in the hat, and Gu Lingyue immediately changed her tune and said, "I'll see." When the two walked to the place where they parted ways, Gu Lingyan slowly bestowed a blessing. "My servant wishes you a smooth journey." Gu Ken said, "Help must not be a disservice." Gu Lingyan smiled sweetly, "I will save it for you, servant girl." Probably because this matter is related to Qin Pingan, he is willing to remind a few more words. Gu Ken said, "You don't have to be too restrained, there is a limit to raising in a jar no matter how big they are." Gu Lingyu covered his mouth and smiled coquettishly. Indeed, the capital of this small country is a typical Shueqian Wangbajuo. She walked to a secluded alley, made a formula, hid her whereabouts and swaggered into the Qingtianjian. There were some taboos in the mountains and rivers, like a child playing with mud to build a pass. Using the method of Yangshen's body, she secretly selected a high-rise building, and Yangshen was responsible for drawing a detailed map of Qingtianjian, and asked Yangshen to go to various places to return books and archives, while her real body walked in Qingtian. In the prison you can enjoy the scenery at will. Along the way she met several groups of Qingtianjian officials who inherited hereditary succession and inherited the father's business as usual. Gu Lingyan took out a few rare family heirloom talismans from her sleeves, and flicked them with her fingers. The talismans turned into emptiness, and were pasted on the foreheads of these Lingtai Langs and court officials. In this way all the people, objects and architectural scenes they saw were brought into Gu Lingyan's eyes. This is the first time for her to visit such an unpopular government office as Qingtianjian, which is not popular in the wild world, so in her eyes, everything is new. After wandering around, she realized that the local supervisors were divided into two categories. One was served by the inner court and belonged to the Iron Rice Bowl, and the other belonged to the strange people temporarily recruited by the court to work as part-time workers. The former is said in the words of not being an official and retiring from old age. As long as the grandparents are supervisors, the fathers will follow, and so will the future generations. For generations they will go around in this Qingshui Yamen, and they cannot be changed. Life is a person of Qingtianjian, and death is a ghost of Qingtianjian. One of them, a young Lingtai Lang, returned to his office. The room was shabby and the light was a little dark. He spread out a pen and paper and began to calculate something magical. The efficacious head is very big. What kind of gap accumulation technique? You can know the round technique. You mess with this every day? No wonder there is so little hair under the officer's hat. Gu Lingyue glanced at Wuxia Street in Yongjia County, but she didn't notice anything unusual. It's a pity that in the list back then only Jinxiu Lu Kai clearly wrote down the 2 flying sword supernatural powers. In a Yamen house, the supervisor Luo Yongqing, Wu Jian, and Li Fujing, 2 deputy supervisors and 3 chief officials are gathering to chat about things. One of the most important matters of the Qin Tianjian in recent years is to be ordered to select the site for Xiangdu's mausoleum. Luo Jianjing often needs to join hands with the inspector of rituals, the Ministry of Rites and officials of Taichung Temple to find auspicious land for today. Wang Qipan is the land of the United States. There can be no mistakes. The matter is of great importance. Qin Tianjian carefully considered the correctness of the text, attached pictures and stickers to keep pace with the book, His Majesty's reply to the order, and back and forth nearly 10 times up. In the market, the elderly began to prepare coffins for themselves before they were alive, and the emperor's family often began to choose a mausoleum with good geomantic omen at the beginning of his enthronement. The 3 inspectors looked at the 2 sand tables in the room. The Ministry of Rites and Qin Tianjian each selected a site for the mausoleum, each with its own advantages and disadvantages. Deputy Supervisor Wu asked, "Old Scholar Lu still insists on his wording?" Not long ago he and He Zhao, minister of the Taichung Temple, went to a place to enshrine the 3 founding princes and gods in their respective new temples. And then select 3 officials from the 8th rank Forever Temple show, to sacrifice. Regardless of the fact that Qin Tianjian is a cold-blooded yamen with little soup and water, what the supervisor has done is indeed not small. Deputy Supervisor Li nodded and said, "Hong Xiaoqing of Taichung Temple agrees with Lu Zueshi's statement. Earlier, I went to the palace with the supervisor and had a small argument with them. It can be seen that His Majesty is also quite troubled. If you continue like this, it is estimated that each will suffer 50 boards." Vice Supervisor Wu laughed and said, "The foreign monks are good at chanting scriptures. You should listen to me, and let the division of the mountains over Lujiao Mountain help us Qin Tianjian to speak a few words of justice, and this matter can be finalized." The supervisor Luo Yongqing sighed, "You don't know. During your departure from Beijing, Lujiao Mountain was very chaotic. How could you care about our side? As long as His Majesty finally decides on the address, Qin Tianjian and the Ministry of Rites can choose an auspicious day to call the ancestors, and the Ministry of Industry will cooperate to start the construction. According to the established etiquette process, a xiangyuan will be built first to prepare for the zigung, and then the imperial court will send the consort Due, the leader made a decree to sacrifice to the mountain gods of the tombs and their locations, and the minister of the Ministry of Industry to sacrifice to the of the chieftain worker. In the end, it was probably a minister of the Ministry of Industry who came to supervise the construction and agency of specific projects. Not to mention complicated affairs. Deputy Supervisor Wu was about to ask about the chaos in Lujiao Mountain. At this moment, a woman's voice sounded from the door and said with a smile, "This is the site of the Emperor's mausoleum carefully selected by your Qin Tianjian. Will Lilong be too lonely? Is it? Do you really need to invite some local experts who are proficient in feng shui to come to Beijing for re-examination and help you make suggestions?" This kind of foreign officials who were temporarily recruited and served in the Qin Tianjian often had a very low rank. After the completion of the project, the temporary official position will be removed immediately, and the imperial court will give some symbolic salary and a clear contribution to the study of the manufacturing office. Even so, the emperor would still go through all the lists in person. If he failed the special assessment by the Ministry of Officials during his tenure, he would still be expelled from the Qin Tianjian. Qin Tianjian's internal affairs are half a word. Once discovered, it will be the end of wearing a shackle and wandering thousands of miles. Such secrets, let alone official histories and inner court secret files, even local chronicles and genealogies are not allowed to have any written records. Unless the country is replaced, the descendants of future generations will dare to write a few strokes on the family tree if they want to make their ancestors famous. Deputy Supervisor Wu said sternly, "Who? Qin Tianjian is a forbidden place of the country. If a Qi trainer dares to trespass here, he will definitely have to go around, and the prison officer on duty will also have to suffer, and it is not easy. One counts as one, no one can escape, and it's not a matter of poor evaluation by the Ministry of Officials and orders from the imperial court." The water ripples on the other side of the door, showing the figure of a woman wearing a veiled hat, with a graceful figure, like a beauty walking out of a lattice picture. She put a finger on her mouth to signal them to keep silent. She thought of herself after walking near the sand table. She picked up a yellow bamboo painting pole and lightly tapped the dragon veins of mountains and rivers on the sand table. She began to talk nonsense in a serious manner. I am an errand in the ritual system department of Luan Mountain. The old ancestors who have been in the soil for a long time have met several times. Back then they talked about geography and arithmetic. It is not about who teaches the other. It is beneficial to each other. This time I happened to pass by and borrowed a few books. Seeing that you are worried about this matter, I just wanted to help you with ideas. Don't worry, I am one of my own, otherwise why would I take the initiative to show up and ask for trouble? She is just looking for something to do. The three supervisors were skeptical about this, but they exchanged their hearts and decided to wait and see what happened, and it was not appropriate to fight. Qin Tianjian's collection of books and instruments are important, but they are not valuable in the worldly sense. Generally speaking, no qi practitioners come here to ask for money, and the risks and benefits are too unequal. In a small room in the imperial palace, a middle-aged couple was sitting on the kong. The woman was afraid of the cold, and she was holding a delicate charcoal cage in her hand. There was also a little old man who was given a chair to sit on, with a brazier at his feet. The old man had a conversation with the man while touching the lice. They were talking about why Hong Zhongyu was able to be promoted from his status as a civil judge of the Qinghuang Temple in the capital to the Lingzhou city god of the suzerain Dali dynasty, but they chatted and talked but they didn't say why. Anyway, Judgment Hong has such an official experience, and the Shui family of Yushuan Kingdom is honored. As for whether Hong Qinghuang will help you Xianxia in the future, don't even think about it. The city gods at all levels are still very different from the general landscape official circles. Then I received a secret letter from the Ma family's mansion in Yongjia County, which made the Emperor Shuepang look dignified. There was no taboo about meddling in politics in the harem, so he directly handed the secret letter to the queen, who then gave it to the old man. Huang Lai, the national teacher of the three dynasties of Yushuan Kingdom. Deep down in the emperor's heart, she had a lot of resentment towards Qin Zheng. Although she got along with each other a few times, she was superficially harmonious, but in fact she looked down on this Ma's housewife the most. Chicken? The old man read the secret letter, wrinkled his face and said softly, "There is no disaster. You Mrs. Ma are so immortal, how could you provoke this person? There are so many outsiders in Aquarius continent, can you just change one of them? Do you have to make enemies with this person?" The old man is an old golden elixir. The earth immortal of Aquarius continent used to be very important. On the territory of one continent, there are hundreds of countries, and the emperors take turns to sit, but there are only a handful of land gods. Just talking about Jinyang Mountain and Fenglei Garden, how many years have the two sides accumulated their wealth? Isn't there still no Yupujing to sit on the top of the mountain? If Li Tuanjing or Zhu Huang, any of the sword immortals, had entered the upper five realms back then, the grievances of hundreds of years would have been cleared up long ago. Of course, today's Aquarius Island is becoming more and more incomprehensible. No matter Aquarius continent can't understand it, I'm afraid the rest of Howran 8 continents can't understand it either. How come there are so many upper five realms popping up all of a sudden? Especially the younger generation in the Lizhu cave, they are so tyrannical and unreasonable. Well, in Tongya continent to the south, the monks of the upper five realms withered and fell one by one, and in Aquarius continent, there were more and more battles from beginning to end. A royal enshrined in gorgeous armor and holding a dagger came here in a hurry to report. "Your Majesty, the door of the Yangzue Palace suddenly opened. When I heard the news, I immediately took people over to investigate, but I saw a stranger. Asked him the origin of his name and the other party did not answer. The emperor mistakenly thought he had heard it wrong and asked, 'What?' The empress frowned, 'Can you drive me away?' This reckless man who was recruited by the imperial court to be enshrined in the inner court said with an embarrassed expression, 'I can't drive you away.' In fact, as the head of the three main halls in Miyagi, the Yangzue Hall, they were enshrined in the inner court, and they couldn't even enter the gate. The emperor smiled wryly, 'National teacher, does this count as blessings and misfortunes never come singly?' The old man nodded, 'The kind who don't come, the one who comes is not kind.' The secret letter I received earlier, the above content, is not vague at all. Qin Pingan came here today to seek revenge and vowed not to give up until he achieved his goal. The Ma family is in trouble today, and I beg the court of the Shui family to protect and help the Ma family to tide over the difficulties. After the matter is completed, the Ma family in Yongjia County will be grateful. The emperor's idea couldn't be simpler. Immortal customs are nothing but heaven and earth. This kind of immortal fight involving personal enmity, Shui only needs to or must be watched from the sidelines. As for Xuanhu Mountain after the incident, to be precise, it was Ma Xuanhuan who was responsible, so you can't vent your anger on them, Mrs. Shui, right? No matter how domineering Ma Xuanhuan is, he can't bypass the Dali dynasty in Xuanhu Academy, right? That's why the Emperor Shui Pang just invited the national teacher to inquire about the matter. Does the imperial court need to mobilize the imperial guards and the 5 city soldiers and Ma Si officers and soldiers to gather in Yongjia County as a show? The national teacher said no, if it is not done well, it will only be self-defeating. The implication is, it's better to pretend to be stupid, just pretend that you didn't receive this letter from Feijin at all. The emperor said cautiously, Master Ma, after all, the Ma family is the pillar that supports the foundation of the country. Without Ma Shi, the involvement is too great and it will inevitably hurt the muscles and bones. The empress lowered her eyes and fiddled with a pastel fasting card with green fingers. She seemed to say casually, that hero Qin Shanju, if he came here this time to avenge his hatred, it is also their private matter on the mountain. Master Qin Shan will not take away the Ma family's property in Yuxuan Kingdom. Regarding the Ma family's property, which is blooming everywhere and flourishing on birthdays, there is a secret account book in the palace, which is a thick book with nearly 100 pages. She has been starving for a long time anyway. If you want to die, you should die cleanly. If people are gone, it would be better if you die completely. Ma's property can naturally be confiscated from the national treasury. To avoid being overthrown by the Ma family, he is deeply entrenched in Yuxuan Kingdom and cannot lose his tail. The empress is afraid that the children of the Ma family will one day become the son-in-law, or that a woman surnamed Ma will have to call her mother-in-law when she enters the palace in a decade or so. Shui Pang asked, National teacher, what should we do with the Yangzue palace? Are we just leaving it alone? Let the other party walk around before leaving? The old man stood up with worry on his brows. Your Majesty, I'll go over and see if I can identify which dragon is crossing the river. As long as the identity of the other party is confirmed, there is no need to worry about him in the 5 realms. I have to make an agreement with your Majesty in advance. If I encounter someone who doesn't speak and act according to common sense, I will do what I can. It's best to persuade. If I can't beat it, I will help close the door. Even if the other party is sitting on his Majesty's dragon chair inside, or even defecating and peeing on it, let him go. Anyway, after closing the door, no one can see what he is making trouble inside. The Emperor Shui Pang nodded with a smile. There is no need for the national teacher to act urgently. Try not to argue and hurt your peace. It's okay to chat with him a few more times. He'll let the imperial dining room prepare melon and fruit snacks. You chatted well, you can take it to Yangzue Palace right away. In fact, I just find it tricky. The other party's violation of the ban is indeed detrimental to the country's constitution, and it has caused the court to lose some face. How frightened or panicked it is not considered. Let's say that 30 or 40 years ago, the monarch of a small country suddenly heard that there was an unidentified chi trainer standing in the main hall of his own palace. How could he be so calm? If we look closely at the root cause, probably the Shui family of Yuxuan Kingdom, as a vassal state of the Dali dynasty, is not too afraid of such accidents. Not to mention that xianxia's courage was smashed to pieces by the Dali dynasty. What about those genealogical immortal masters and martial arts masters? When the national teacher left the house and went to the Yangzue palace, the emperor squinted his eyes and said with a smile, These cultivators are immortals. Holding the charcoal cage in her hands, the empress said lazily, Who says it's not? Pei Qian came to the gate of the city god's temple in the capital, and there were incense and candle shops along the street, because it was the time of heavy rain, and today was the Qingming festival. The town god's temple, which was originally full of incense, only had a few sparse oil paper umbrellas moving slowly. Pei Qian supported the bamboo hat on his head, held a walking stick, and walked slowly through the gate of the mountain gate, and entered the second gate of rites. As he saw along the way, the plaques were mostly gold characters on a blue background. Mansions and palaces have a different style, and are also regarded as landscape officialdom on the mountain. In fact, the underworld officials of the town god's temple and the landscape gods still have different divisions of responsibilities. The main hall is enshrined in the seated statue of the god of the city god, with one judge on the left and martial judge on the right. The city god and other officials and ghosts line up in order, with strict ceremonies. Cure the souls of all walks of life. It's just that Hong Zhongyu, the old civil judge, has been transferred to another place, so this golden statue is temporarily covered with a big red cloth. When the new civil judge takes office, he will replace it with a statue of the god. It is due to the big white goose, a little brother who knows astronomy and geography in the school of his own teacher, and can answer almost any question. In addition, Pei Qian once traveled alone to the vast number of continents, so Pei Qian is now very familiar with all kinds of the historical origins and local anecdotes of weird and mysterious, can be described as well-informed. According to Cui Dongshan's explanation, the duties of city gods at all levels are still mainly reception. It is worthy of claiming to have been to Fengdu. The fish-scale yellow books stored in the household department of secular dynasties record in detail the land and household registration of a country. The town god's temple is responsible for recording in detail the merits and demerits of all living beings in the world. Pei Qian came outside the main hall of the Xuanhuan temple in the capital city, invited incense candles on the street outside the gate, and bowed 3 times to the underworld officials in the main hall, paying homage to the world. After Pei Qian finished burning incense and paying homage, a Japanese wandering with the appearance of a woman, slender, with a gauze cap and a broad robe, although she is a woman, has a majestic appearance. She hangs a wooden sign "Daily Patrol" at her waist and rides a red fire horse. Was in charge of leading a team to tour the boundaries of the capital during the day, and noticed something strange in the town god's temple. She rushed here immediately because of her responsibilities. Sumu asked, "Who is here?" Pei Qian self-registration number, Junior Pei Qian. I have seen the Beijing Master's Ryu God, and my genealogy is settled in Luapa Mountain in the Chuzhou territory of the Great Li Dynasty. Please bother me. Ryu Shin said the word "wait a moment," and took out a green jade book from which she hooked a series of golden and yellow characters, all of which were well documented. Pei Qian's golden and jade genealogy on the mountain is indeed the Patriarch Hall of Jisa Peak in Luapa Mountain, and the Yellow Book of Household Registration is in Huaihuan County, Longquan County, Dalichu Prefecture. The Certificate of Customs Clearance in Yangjian can be forged, but it cannot be concealed from a city god's temple with a bright mirror hanging high. Ryu Shin hesitated for a moment, then smiled and said, "Mr. Pei, your date of birth and hometown do not match. One more question, is there an error in the records of the household in Huaihuan County, Dali?" Although there are different paths, Ryu Shin, as a female priest of the town god's temple, belongs to the orthodox assistant official of the underworld. No matter how polite a martial artist is, it's just that Pei Qian is the founding disciple of Qin Jianxian in Luaba Mountain, and she is also a popular person, on a certain file in the town god's temple. In short, no matter where Pei Qian is in Haoran Jiuzhou, as long as she passed by town temples at all levels, even town gods in prefectures and counties in remote and small countries, and after checking her identity she would pay a little respect to Pei Qian. Pei Qian explained with a smile, "I was born in Tanggishao Hua blessed land, but I can't remember my birth date for a long time. Later I followed my master to Huaihuan County and just wrote a file at the household house." Ryu Shin nodded with a smile, "It doesn't matter, it doesn't hinder God's calculation of multiplication and division." She asked again, "Master Pei, do you want to find out your birth date?" Pei Qian shook his head and said, "It's a good intention, no need." The month and day of her birth recorded at the government office in Huaihuan County were all based on the month and day when she first met Master. Martial arts practitioners pay attention to apprenticeship as reincarnation. It is very good, there is no need to change it. The Japanese wandering made a concise self-introduction with Pei Qian. It turned out that her name was xianxia. She was also a very famous female general in the history of Yushuan Kingdom. Xianxia asked, "Mr. Pei is visiting the city god's temple in the capital, is there something wrong?" Pei Qian blushed and said, "I can't afford to be called Mr. Pei. Qin Rixen just needs to call me by my name." Qin Lingxian smiled without saying a word, waiting for the next article. Pei Qian said, "Just passing by here, let's take a look." Qin Nishuan nodded with a smile, said goodbye and left. Pei Qian glanced at the sitting statue of city god in the main hall, and the painted statue of Judge Wu beside him. Even if it is a small vassal state with weak national power, the temple of the capital city god will have at least 12 divisions. For example, the capital city and the accompanying capital of the Great Li Dynasty, the 2 city gods' temples each have as many as 36 divisions. And the temple of the city god, the head of the world's city gods, is located in the Ganoderma Lucidum dynasty in Shenzhou, China, with as many as 62 departments in the government office. Zhou Fangyu, the city god, has the same position as the 5 sacred mountains of the Middle Earth and the lords of the 4 seas. The 4 chief officials and generals under the command of this Zhou Qinghuang are named Gan, Lu, Fan and Xie respectively. Pei Qian had visited this town god's temple in the past. In fact, she also had a relationship with Zhou Qinghuang and General Fan. Of course, it is not the situation of today's living people looking up at the gods. The 2 sides have chatted. It's just that there seems to be nothing to say about this kind of thing. Yuqing, who had been a cook in Nama Mansion for many years, no longer dared to continue climbing the mountain, and slowly retreated to the foot of the mountain, and then followed the long river to find Xiaoxing, who claimed to be from the wild world. As an accomplished qi practitioner on the mountain, she wasn't afraid of those scenes of corpses hanging from swords, but she was afraid of the deep meaning hidden behind this picture. She was worried that if she made a wrong step, she would become one of them and she would not be able to reach the world or the ground, so she just swayed like this. Yuqing stopped and remained silent for a long time, looking at the barbaric female cultivator on the other side who even spoke the real name of the monster race. Dare to ask Miss Xiao, where is this place? Xiaoxing squatted by the river, washed his face with water, patted his cheek and asked, is it important to know where you are? Yuqing said, if you don't tell me I will leave. Xiaoxing lost his composure in an instant, and stretched out his hand, like a drowning man trying to grab a life-saving straw, begging the beautiful woman on the other side not to leave, never to leave, and to accompany her a few words. Yuqing looked at the devastated wild female cultivator, and sighed faintly. Could the situation of the woman on the other side today be the same as her own situation tomorrow? She asked, ask fellow Taoist Xiao, how do you keep your Tao heart from collapsing? Probably because he cherishes every opportunity to talk with people. Xiaoxing always likes to talk a lot of digressions before getting into the main topic. She claims that although it is only a mind, she can also visualize a complete soul, which is no different from a real person. Soul wandering and sleepwalking in the world, although they have similar approaches but the same effect, are different in essence. Xiaoxing is now using the method of guarding the house by leaving a ghost to live in his real body. It works, but only temporarily. She has used more than a dozen kinds of barbaric secret methods to barely maintain her Tao heart so as not to lose it. Yuqing asked curiously, what is the identity of the young Taoist priest sitting on the other side of the mountain steps? Is it Chen Pingganzin who travels far away, or a yang with an outer body? Why does he look like this? Is it particular? Xiaoxing smiled suddenly, as if there was a kind of hearty feeling of revenge for a great revenge. It was this that made her delicate appearance look a little deformed and distorted. Neither, he will never have Yin God and Yang God again in this life. It is a sage's direct succession, but it is doomed to not be able to raise half of the natal character. Pitiful, extremely pitiful. As for that Taoist-like existence, it is. Young Master Ren. Yuqing deliberately omitted those inside stories that could not be determined to be true or false, but the last sentence made her puzzled. What? Xiaoxing tilted his head and asked with a smile. Even I, a wild animal, know that Hauran has a poem who is like Mr. Ren, riding a donkey in the clouds, which is very popular. You are an immortal of Hauran and you have never heard of it. At the end of the line of sight, hundreds or thousands of miles away with white clouds like the sea, you can still clearly see a young Taoist priest wearing a lotus crown, no boots, barefoot cross-legged, riding on a green donkey, holding a golden fishing line. One of the bamboo poles was thrown far away, the silk thread flashed golden light on the high place, and the fishhook fell into the long green river on the ground. In an instant, huge waves were created in the water, churning like snow, and the water splashed and thundered. Aware of the sight from this side, the young Taoist smiled and waved at them, and raised A to his lips, as if to signal the two girls to keep quiet and scare away the fish that were about to bite. Xiaoxing asked abruptly, are you a sword cultivator? Yuqing said with a smile, how is it possible? How rare is a sword cultivator? If she was a noble swordsman, she wouldn't be in the Ma mansion. Where is Jinxiu, not a sweet potato? Xiaoxing stared intently at the plump woman on the opposite bank, with a radiant look, and said, here, if you want, you can do it. Since we are called friends of the Taoist, and we are indeed in trouble together, I can help. How many natal flying swords do you want? It's all negotiable. However, I'm only in charge of drafting. It's like creating a very rough clay embryo. To truly come alive, he, the chief reviewer, has to come in person, to finalize and name it, and endow it with a justifiable truth. Between the words, a lifelike painted clay figurine Yuqing appeared beside Xiaoxing, but the latter temporarily closed his eyes, as if he just missed the finishing touch. This one is located in the chime, with a beautiful appearance and a dignified attitude. It is somewhat better than a real woman. Xiaoxing surrounded the fake Yuqing, adding hairpins, cross-stitched flowers and other exquisite accessories to her one after another. At the same time he pointed at the chest and buttocks and gently kneaded and rubbed her a few times. Fellow Taoist figure is really good. Childbirth, do you need to apply yellow blush on your cheeks, or do you think that no makeup is more elegant? Here and here, do you want to be bigger and fuller or still feel a little cumbersome and want to reduce it? By the way, how many flying swords would you like to have, fellow Taoist? Have you thought about the shape and supernatural power of each flying sword? There is a blissful place for a novelist to paint eyebrows on the mountain. When the two are added together, there are all kinds of whimsical ideas and strange scenes. Yu Qing asked, "This world, is it all built by you with careful consideration of the details bit by bit?" Xiaoxing sneered and said, "How dare you be greedy for merit, less than 100. To be honest, the so-called boundless world you are seeing at this moment is just one of more than 10 phantom scrolls, which he marked as Xingting 6. I know of a total of more than 20 small worlds. What proportion can they occupy?" I was blinded. He didn't give me more authority to open the scroll, just glanced at it from a distance. It's like a large group of fireflies in the summer grass, bright spots flickering. Although I can't wait to peel that Chinpingan's skin and cramps, eat his flesh and drink his blood and dissect his bones, but I have to admit that, leaving aside the grudges if it's just a meeting on the road with his means, let me kneel down and kowtow, admitted he must be happy to be a patriarch. Hearing this, Yu Qing sarcastically said, "Fellow Taoist really knows everything without saying anything." Xiaoxing smiled and said, "Since you and I are destined to stay together forever here, what are you hiding?" In the next scene, Yu Qing was caught off guard. He saw Xiaoxing smiling charmingly and staring at the woman on the other side. Xiaoxing took off his whole body of dress without saying a word, revealing a snow-white carcass, raised his legs wrapping around Yu Qing's waist. Yu Qing's face darkened, he turned around and walked towards the green hill. There was a burst of gasping from the other side. Yu Qing scolded a shameless pickle. Xiaoxing just sat there with Yu Qing by himself, winking like silk, weeping like complaining. She looking at the woman's distant back, she kept moving her hands, took off the dress of Yu Qing, and held up a heavy and swollen mountain on her chest, and with a pitiful look she murmured, "Good sister, you don't know it all, you don't know anything. What is the true Tao heart between heaven and earth? He looks at this matter not just as a simple view of bones, good sister, this kind of pleasure in fish and water, the joy of bed. I know you are familiar with it, so why pretend to be ashamed? Just treat it as a candid Taoism observation, just watch, the ups and downs of the sea of desire are also practice." Yu Qing looked around and asked loudly, "Qin Pingan, this is the world of your heart? This is your way of hospitality?" Xiao Xinghua was crazy, took off the pearl hairpin, let go of her hair, and pushed the Yu chime to the ground. She leaned down, and then the snow-white and delicate bodies of the two parties entangled like snakes for a moment. Xiaoxing actually began to stutter, aroused the flesh and blood of the latter. Yu Qing looked gloomy, his hands and feet were cold. Because vaguely she saw through the real body of that long river. It is a green snake with an extremely long body, and the river water is actually a dense cluster of countless snake scales, but under the shining sunlight, it shines brightly, flowing like water. The love between men and women is full of desire. The young Taoist who was called Mr. Rin, by Xiaoxing, put away his fishing rod and threw it in the white clouds. The Taoist stepped back to Yu Qing's side, walked side by side and praised, "You Dao's friendly eyes, you have seen the truth of this long river so quickly. Fellow Taoist Xiao has lost a lot of knowledge and vision." A red leather gourd was hung in front of the young Taoist with a golden thread, and a peach branch was inserted obliquely in the back of his collar. He smiled and said, "Masters who have entered the mountain to cultivate the Tao, don't shy away from talking about lust. Immortals originally come from mortals because the mortal mind is not firm. Ordinary peoples for tongue, beauty, ugliness and embarrassment, fame, fortune, honor and disgrace are the shackles, love in the world of mortals are the cage, and the darkness of life and death is another prison. The gates are connected like mountains, and one mountain passes 10,000 mountains. It is said that distant relatives are not as good as close neighbors. Dare to ask fellow Taoist for his real surname." Hearing this, Yu Qing finally said, "The Taoist guessed wrong, my surname is not Lu, but my surname is Gongsun." The Taoist asked with a smile, "Friend Gongsun and Shishan Jianin are in the same lineage, do you have a parentage?" Yu Qing said with a complex expression, "I was indeed one of those who cleansed my wrongdoers, but I was not from Shishan Jianin's lineage. Later I broke the ban and was expelled. I was like Qingping, drifting with the crowd, and was recruited by Zhenwushan Ma Xuanhuan, and he has a promise for the first time. But at that time Ma Xuanhuan didn't say who the enemy of his family, the Ma family, was. He only said that there was a fellow from his hometown who was still the same age, and he had just started practicing boxing not long ago, and he might cause some troubles for the Ma family in the future. She figured it out. At that time Yu Qing thought about it, but he didn't think there was anything wrong with it. A young martial artist who just started practicing boxing. Even if he was given another 60 years, he would be able to make a name for himself. Yuqing asked, "You are?" The Taoist said with a smile, "Since they are both fallen in the world, why bother to ask the bottom line to find out the background?" Yuqing sneered. "Then why did you ask my real surname just now?" The Taoist said without shame, "After getting along for a long time, Taoist friends will understand a little bit." The poor Taoist has always been lenient to himself and strict with others. The Taoist patted the gourd. "Invite fellow Taoists into this urn, and don't ask the poor Taoist what kind of medicine is sold in this gourd?" Yuqing smiled casually. "It can't be a medicine for regret, can it?" The Taoist was surprised and said, "Friend Taoist is smart, and he hits the nail on the head. Just need medicine. Everyone wants to taste the medicine of regret, please be fearful first." Yuqing lost the interest to speak. The gods and the way deliberately mystifying. Never thought that the last hidden official of the Sword Chi Great Wall would be such a frivolous figure. The young hermit in her imagination should be purer and act more aboveboard. For example, if you want to seek revenge with the Ma family, you have to fight all the way from the gate to the family ancestral hall. Why do you pretend to be a ghost like this and make people feel like falling into the clouds? Yuqing said, "I only have one last question. Detain me here. What is the fellow Taoist asking for? Can you be honest and clear up my doubts?" The young Taoist said with a smile, "Our chief Luobashan Jiang once said a very tenacious truth. Fellow Taoist Gongsun, would you like to listen to it?" The Taoist asked himself and answered, "A person who cultivates the Tao, the greatest guardian of the Tao is ourselves." The Taoist squatted down, reached out and grabbed a large handful of soil, rubbed it lightly in the palm of his hand, let go of his fingers and the debris of the soil fell, but in the process of falling they seemed to pass through layers of sieves, each hovering at different heights. The sieve has 7 layers, and the higher the sieve mesh, the larger the grit, so the soil and gravel, that stays down the finer. Let as many pure people as possible here love, hatred, flowering. And fruiting, trees are full of shade, and then a mess of greed, hatred, ignorance, suspicion, complex human nature, and cocoons are unraveled, and finally relying on your words, voices, eyes, expressions and actions here take root on the ground, exist forever, rely on addition, subtraction, multiplication and division, and rearrange, so that these small worlds that are distorted due to purity become more and more impure reality. So you are all seeds. As for whether it is rapeseed or the seeds of flowers and trees, it is up to you to decide today what will be tomorrow. Yuqing couldn't help but asked another question. The outside world said that the reason why you were able to carve characters on the top of the city was because you borrowed a sword from Qin Qingdu, or borrowed a method from Master Lu. In my true state, I can go through a wild journey, and I can't kill the culprit of the Toyua mountain monster. I don't ask these inside stories, I just want to know one thing, what is your current knowledge? The Taoist said with a smile, "It's a good question. What is the realm of knowing?" The implication of the fellow Taoist is that although I returned the sword skills of the Ba Sword Fairy, or the Taoism taught by Zhang, I secretly left them behind. State of mind? So no matter if I am in the nascent soul realm or the Jade Raw realm, my cognition of this world stays at the 14th realm, inheriting their Tao veins? That's why my means of creation here seem to be so it doesn't match your own realm? What a mortal heart follows things, and a saintly person follows his heart. Fellow Taoist, you is worthy of being an expert who came from the line of purging wrongdoers, and his knowledge is not low. Yuqing squatted down and looked at the top floor of the high tower. There were a few small stones and some gravel. Can you treat them as monks on the top of the mountain, the 14th realm? The young Taoist priest wearing a lotus crown clapped his hands and joked, "The last is the last, and there are so many lasts." Yuqing asked to himself, "What is the root of this world?" The Taoist smiled and said, "Soil, flowing water, the circulation of clear and turbid air, the climate changes in 4 seasons, all living beings, can be words, sentences and chapters composed of billions of trillions of characters. The land, mountains and rivers, city buildings, can be millions of talismans, can also be your 7 emotions and 6 desires." Yuqing asked, "The last question, is there any limit?" The Taoist said, "The world is full of wonders. The heart is boundless, the law is boundless, and the present moment is endless." Yuqing asked, "Is it just a coincidence that you found me?" It's not difficult to say a few beautiful and polite words to fellow Taoists, but it doesn't make any sense. The Taoist priest reached out and grabbed some dirt that was available everywhere, and then stretched out his fingers towards Yuqing, as if grabbing and twisting a gorgeous pearl from her body like a pocket moon slowly flowing. You have a pearl, I have sand, a handful. Don't talk about external prices, just talk about this place. Tell me what's the difference between high and low, high and low. This is called being born to be useful. The Taoist reached out to break up the treasure pagoda, stood up and pointed to the long river. We have hit it off, so I might as well tell you a secret. In order to save some effort, the source of the river bed comes from one of the tributaries of the swaying river in the wild world. That indeterminate river. A long river green snake is a sword skill. It still needs to be polished repeatedly. Yu Qing followed suit and stood up. Swordsmanship has been achieved, who will ask the sword? The Taoist didn't answer the question and said with a smile, do you want to continue visiting Baiyujing? Yu Qing asked doubtfully, continue? The Taoist didn't speak and walked towards the green hill. Yu Qing turned his head and looked, the cloud and mist cleared, and the green hill showed its true face. It was actually the 12th floor of the 5 cities. The Taoist priest strode forward, his sleeves fluttering, and a string of purple and gold characters appeared on the avenue beside the Taoist priest. There are not only the secrets of spiritual books, but also the treasures of xianxia as well as poems and ancient prose. In the spring day there is yang and there is ming tsanging. The road is late and the center is violated. In ancient times, a virtuous sage once saw a bird like an owl, and when it pecked a tree with its mouth, it would burst into flames. The capital of Xuanhuan Kingdom. Xianxia stood at the gate of the outer city. No matter how late the old master realized, he knew that he was in an unimaginable ghostly place. Walking out of the moss house in Wuxia Lane, Yongjia County, this is the scene. What if he walks out of the capital next time? The streets were full of the same face. Xianxia hesitated for a moment, did not dare to leave the capital, went for a walk from door to door, drank and dined, chatted with random people, went shopping or even killed people, it didn't matter. Those people in the capital, high-ranking officials, all kinds of craftsmen, shopkeepers and guests of all kinds, all have the same face anyway. Their bodies are as fragile as a piece of paper. I dipped my fingers in the blood and tasted it, and it did smell fishy. This made Xianxia's hair stand on end and couldn't help cursing, what a wicked way. Afterwards, Xianxia tried to get out of the capital, but every time he tried, no matter whether he was darting out of the city or going out through the gate, he would return to the capital the next moment, hitting the wall like a ghost. Xianxia tried to find a third face in such a large capital city of Xuanhuan Kingdom. No matter how he walked, ran or flew, the people he saw all had the same face. Live like years. A living person cannot be suffocated to death by urine, so Xianxia began to find something to do, such as opening a museum to teach boxing, returning to his old business to go to the palace to kill people, or even opening a silk shop. Those disciples who learn boxing or the guests who come to the door are no different from ordinary people in words and deeds, except for their appearance. Poor old master, just getting thinner and thinner, his appearance is haggard. At the beginning he could count time, but after a few days Xianxia became completely numb. Surrounded by more than 200,000 people, Xianxia seems to be living among a bunch of walking dead. I don't know what year this year is. The 4 seasons in the capital flow in an orderly manner. On a snowy day, the old man with a sad expression sat on the white jade bridge outside the palace city with a dull expression. I'm getting old. To be driven crazy. A man wearing a golden crown and a green gauze robe smiled and said, Old Master Xin, we are old acquaintances now, don't you mind calling you Brother Xin? As expected of a martial artist in the golden body state who is about to break through, his body is full of punches and should not be underestimated. The falling snowflakes are like a brazier, melting the world by itself. Xianxia turned his head stiffly, looking at the handsome immortal. The old man's lips trembled slightly. Xianxian, please forgive me. The man put his arms around his sleeves and leaned against the railing. Reason. Xianxia wanted to cry without tears and begged, Xianxian, we have no grievances or enmity. It is clearly the first time we met in the Ma Mansion of Yongjia County. I did not provoke Xianxian, even the words were not considered offensive. Why does Xianxian imprison me here? I can only wait to die every day. Qin Ping smiled and said, You have no grievances or enmities with me, but you have a deep enmity with this world. Hearing this, Xianxia felt sad for a moment, his old tears were muddy, he raised his sleeves and wiped the corners of his eyes. He has learned boxing and kicking in this life. Since he was a teenager he has been walking in the rivers and lakes for about a year. Xianxia dare not say my heart is like a rock, more tenacious than that of a chi trainer, but I have seen a lot of weird battles. But the current situation is so pervasive that Xianxia would never even dare to think about it in his life. It's like falling into a nightmare without ghosts and I can't wake up. Qin Pingan said, It's a good finger. After so many years, there is still a bit of subjugation. Could it be that Brother Xin also killed the emperor? Shinku was a little guilty and said with a wry smile, "The objects in a small country's palace are not worth a lot of money. If Qin Jianxian wants to take them, he can just chop off my fingers and take them together. I just asked Qin Jianxian to let me leave this place." "Ghost place?" Qin Pingan asked. "What do you think is unreasonable in this capital city, and what details need to be improved?" The truth may not all come from correctness and reasonableness, and the truth may also come from absurdity, irrationality, sensibility, and no context at all. Shinku heard that a head was as big as a dustpan. How could it be unreasonable? "Qin Jianxian, you old man, ask yourself what is reasonable here." Qin Ping smiled and said, "Talking about this with a martial arts master like you seems a bit difficult. In the most populous place in the country, it is difficult to find birds during the heavy snow season, the water under the bridge freezes, and there is a cold light overhead in short days." After a moment of silence, Qin Pingan said, "If you want good people to be rewarded, evil people must be rewarded with evil. Shinku, do you think this makes sense?" Before Shinku could speak, from this moment on, everyone in the entire capital had turned into Shinke's face. The wicked have their own grind. The villain is the same person before and after. Shinku turned his head and looked. The fairy in green clothes had already walked off the bridge, turned his head and looked at Shinku and said with a smile, "If martial arts is a killing technique, don't you like killing people? This city is full of ants. More than 21 chi practitioners are not at a high level, at most the lower 5 levels. You can kill as many as you want until your hand cramps and you vomit. The only trouble is that those Yuxuan Kingdom's armored soldiers, they may with martial arts. I would like to remind you one last thing. Brother Shin, remember to find a few more weapons at hand. The movements must be fast." Between the other party's words, Shinku was horrified to find that the entire capital city was like being folded paper, and finally the ground of the capital city turned into a ball, and people of all colors in the city swarmed from all directions along the streets and alleys. Shinku seems to have a sworn enemy. Inside the sphere, it was unclear whether the goose feather snow fell from the sky, but floated from the ground. In the heavy snow, there is no trace of the sword fairy anymore, only the voice like singing and singing, swaying with the snow. For example, a Dao Gaoxian is gently shaking a wind-blowing bell. From now on, enjoy yourself, sleep high and eat, be a fairy in drinking, listen to the sounds of nature. All 4 seasons are beautiful. What can I worry about? The guy with the word worry dared to knock on the pass and violate the border, and he would kill and retreat as soon as he came. Inside the hall of the Ma family's ancestral house in Xinghua Lane, the scene in front of him made Pu Liu's eyelids tremble. The woman who was dressed more elegantly and more luxuriously than Mrs. Gaoming grabbed the white silk with both hands, and kept cursing and cursing. The man just begged for mercy. Qin Zheng straightened his legs and tapped the ground with his toes. Ma Yan's neck had already been strangled with bright red marks. As a result, that Qin Jianxian told Pu Lu not to stand upright, and went to pry open the floor tiles where the couple was standing so that one would not be suspended while the other stood there, taking turns to take a rest. The old woman didn't dare not to do so, so she had to follow orders, took away the green bricks from the couple's feet, and dug 2 small pits, not big but not shallow. Qin Pingan said to dig again, but he can take his time. The old woman continued to dig a hole like a grave. Qin Pingan leaned against the door and asked casually, "Tell Ma how to accumulate Yin virtue and get away with it at the town god's temple. Is it the meaning of the ghost jianghu, or the old man who carried the dung bucket?" The old woman squatted on the ground and continued to work and replied honestly, "As for the sword immortal, I have tested the knowledge of this master of the Mafu school several times. Although Jianghu was born as a ghost, his knowledge is also mixed, but it is limited in terms of vision, experience and cultivation level, but he can't teach Ma Shi such secrets. I guess it's the method of Zhongchang, among the enshrined in Ma's house. This old man is the only one I can't see clearly. It's just that Pu Lu didn't dare to ask even if he was beaten to death. The Mas and his wife are right here. Hanging around, wouldn't it be better to interrogate them directly?" The old woman couldn't figure it out. Isn't this Qin Jianxian a scholar? Why are they so sinister and malicious? It's just that the old woman quickly forced herself to get rid of these thoughts that she shouldn't have. It's up to this point, whether she can survive or not is still a question. In the past, I just thought that a horse mansion was smoky and dirty. How could I have imagined that it was actually so dangerous and dangerous? The 3 flying sword letters that Ma and his wife believed to be concealed were sent to Emperor Shui of Yuxuan Kingdom, Judge Wu of the City God Temple in the capital, and the Picket Division of the Shanshan Mansion in Lujiao Mountain. The old woman Puliu was indeed prepared both openly and secretly, but it was a pity that Qin Jianxian intercepted them all, and took out 6 secret letters in front of her. Chen Pingan sat at the painting table, leisurely grinding and picking up the brush, helping to circle the zhu, carefully considering the words and sentences, deliberating on the content, and finally rewrote 3 letters. Legend has it that the Taoist immortal has great supernatural powers, and has the world in one hand and can cover everything. But in this way, Qin Tianjian and Jingshi City God will soon discover the vision in Mafu Yongjia County. So the old woman still can't figure out how Qin Pingan isolated the world. Qin Ping smiled and said, "If you don't understand Zhong Chang who cleans toilets and works as a handyman, you can understand Yu Qin who works as a cook?" The old woman was puzzled and said, "Qin Jianxian is referring to that foxy woman who cooks well in her own kitchen?" Qin Pingan said, "Only she is the family enshrined that Ma Xuanhuan personally invited. You guys are not the backbone, just make up the number." The old woman tentatively asked, "Dare to ask Qin Jianxian, is that woman Yu Qin an Ascension Realm? If it wasn't for Ascension Realm blocking Qin Pingan's revenge, it seems that it would not be enough. You really dare to think?" Qin Pingan shook his head and smiled. "Yu Qin is in the nascent soul realm just like you. How many people were there in the nascent soul realm in Aquarius Island more than 20 years ago? They are not small fish or shrimps. It's going to be a big storm." Pulu dug the hole like a well. It was deep enough. The old woman looked at the woman opposite from the corner of her eyes. The current situation is a deadlock. The cruelty is not just the dead but the couple, one of them is doomed to die first. Of course it can be Ma Yin or Qin Zheng who take the initiative to die. People who die early and die late go to xuanhuan hand in hand, meet outside the gate of hell, and there is no resentment between each other. It's just that there is another situation that is even worse, one person strangles the other. In this way on Xuanhuan Road, it's hard to say whether the culprit, Qin Pingan, is hated more, or the husband and wife hate each other more. Ma Yin became ruthless. He was a man after all, with a heavy body and more strength, stepped on the pit with both feet, and then began to pull the white silk on the beam to his side, lifting the woman high. Qin Zheng was hoisted up bit by bit, her feet were lifted off the ground, the woman sobbed softly, her eyes were red, her struggling movements with her hands gradually weakened along with the sound, and finally there was no sound at all. Qin Ping turned a blind eye to this but did not hear it. The woman's head was about to touch the invisible beam, and she was reduced to a hanged ghost. Ma Yin stood in the well, holding the white silk tightly with both hands, only his head was exposed, and his feet stood on tiptoe at the bottom of the well. The old woman asked softly, "Qin Jianxian, can I dig another 2 or 3 feet down?" Qin Pingan put his sleeves in his hands and leaned against the door of the main room, quietly looked up at the woman's death and said calmly, "No, just wait slowly. I heard that Ma Yin also had burns when he was young. Make porcelain, see how strong your arm is and how long it can last." The old woman remained silent, with mixed feelings in her heart, how much evil she had done in her previous life. She would enter the Ma's mansion in this life, and meet such a person seeking revenge against the Ma family again. Qin Pingan asked, "What is the cruelest torture Master Pu Xian has seen in this life?" The old woman replied softly, "One is to strip the soul like twisting a rope, make a wick and light an oil lamp. It can make monks only want to die quickly." Qin Pingan nodded and said, "I have seen it with my own eyes in the Luzhou Ghost Valley in Beiju. The lighted water is very permeable and horrible." The old woman said, "There is also a kind of water prison on the mountain, forcibly breaking open 1 or 2 chi palaces as passages, pouring a lot of spiritual energy inside, forming a trend of flooding in the small world of the human body, the bones gradually swell, and the soul is forcibly broken. During this period the chi and blood swelled, the meridians were broken, and the muscles and bones were cracked. I heard that Yamazawa Yeshio likes to use this method to target those pure warriors with tough physiques." Qin Pingan said, "This kind of death is a bit similar to a piece of porcelain from my hometown. You have seen a lot, senior, so please tell me a few more ways." How dare the old woman hide her secrets, so she said 7 or 8 more methods on the mountain. Qin Pingan listened very carefully, and when the old woman was at the end of her words, she asked with a smile, "Is it all from hearsay? Or have you verified it yourself?" The old woman said with embarrassment, "I heard, it's all heard. Some people have human hearts and inhumanity, so it is difficult to distinguish between human beings and ghosts. There are realms without Taoism, so how come immortals and mortals have different paths?" Qin Pingan said, "Seeing is worse than hearing and seeing is worse than experiencing it yourself. You will have a taste of these methods later. Pulu is like being hit by a sap stick, and it is the kind of stick that hits the head and covers the face. The pain of the fire torture in the house has been unforgettable to the old woman. How can she bear these 7 or 8 kinds of torture?" Qin Ping twitched the corner of his mouth. Senior has lived a lot of years, why can't he still take jokes so much? The old woman said bitterly, Qin Jianxian, I am not young but I am not very courageous. I cherish my life the most. Qin Pingan said, go tie a few bricks to Mrs. Qin's feet. The old woman was in a hurry to tie bricks to the legs of the hanged woman. In this way, the weight of the woman who seemed to hang herself from a beam was about to exceed Ma Yen. Qin Pingan asked, if you can leave Ma Mansion alive, what are your plans? The old woman said cautiously, find a secluded place, hide your name and practice honestly. Qin Ping smiled and said, how is that different from being in the Ma Mansion? Could it be that here you are not practicing honestly? The old woman tentatively said, I implore Qin Jianxian to give me some advice, I will definitely do as I wish, even if Qin Jianxian suggested that I go to a nunnery to shave my hair and practice, I would also be willing. Are you going to be a bustard in a brothel? What's so difficult about this? Experience in the world of mortals is also practice. Is there a client who insists on you to pick up the client? Tolerated him too. Qin Ping shook his head. The old woman was very worried. Qin Pingan asked, do you feel that you are asking blindly or striking the bell with a clam? The old woman whispered. The two sides chatted about Xiantian, and the old woman tremblingly said, Qin Jianxian, both of them were hanged. Qin Pingan said, then you will arrest their souls. The old woman reminded in a low voice, Qin Jianxian, someone died in the house. I believe that the city god's temple in the capital will know what's going on here soon, and the ghost messenger is here if you see it. What's more, during the daytime as usual, there is a day tour in Xuanhuan Temple who is responsible for patrolling the boundaries. The Fengdu prefecture does business impartially, but it doesn't care about any kindness. Qin Pingan said, they can't come in even if they know. Pu Lu didn't dare to say a word, and used the earth fairy method to arrest the souls of Ma Yen and Qin Zheng. Two erratic ghosts stood in the room, and Ma Yen lowered his head, shrinking back, not daring to look at the woman. Qin Zheng stared at that ruthless bitch. Qin Ping said with a smile, everyone is dead, but in the end I still can't go to the city god's temple in the capital, and I can't be the underworld official registered in Fengdu. Do you feel aggrieved by dying in vain? Pu Lu asked softly, Qin Jianxian, is this old man going to light their lamps or put them in a dungeon? Now that you're on the thief's boat you can't do anything. Qin Pingan said, killing without blood is like eating noodles without garlic. The old woman was taken aback. Qin Pingan left the house and went to the firewood room to find a knife and a handful of iron nails in his hand, then returned to the main room, split the tables and stools and made two coffins skillfully. The old woman became more and more confused as she watched. Qin Pingan asked the old woman to tear off the white silk, and the two corpses, one suspended in the air and the other underground, fell to the ground and collapsed to the ground. After asking Pu Lu to put the two corpses into the coffin, Qin Pingan said, since you are so greedy for life and afraid of death, let you fulfill your wish, return your soul and return to the underworld. With a wave of his sleeves, the ghosts and ghosts returned to their bodies in an instant. Qin Pingan closed the coffin. During this period, Ma Yin struggled to sit up, but was beaten back to lie down by Qin Pingan with a hatchet, and then began to hit the iron nails with the back of the knife. Qin Jing's voice was hoarse and she began to yell, but it was useless, so she screamed and wailed, but she could only watch helplessly as she fell into darkness, lying in the coffin, unable to see her fingers. Qin Pingan said, the second type. Pu Lu was silent again. Qin Pingan stretched out his fingers and tapped the coffin lightly. How long do you think they can last? Are they starved to death, thirsty to death or scared to death? The old woman frowned and dared not speak. Qin Pingan came to the door and looked at the sky outside. The old woman looked at her nose, and heart and began to hold her breath. There were sounds in the two coffins. There were violent beating sounds. How long has it been? Even if Emperor Yuxuan made up his mind to stand by and watch, even though the Lijiashan picket was too busy to take care of himself and refused to step into the muddy water, why was there still no movement at the city god's temple in the capital? Qin Ping said with a smile, one jiazi in the mountain has been in the world for thousands of years. This is called living like a year. The old woman accidentally asked nonsense. Are you really Qin Jianxian from Luapa Mountain? Qin Ping asked back, do you know who Qin Jianxian is in Luapa Mountain? The old woman sighed. The couple suffered, but she was very upset. Qin Ping walked to the gate of the courtyard, opened the gate and found Xinghua Lane. It is said to be Xinghua Lane, but there are no apricot trees planted, and I don't know how it got its name. Soon after, a dejected old man came and looked at Qin Pingan at the door. The old man seemed to be confirming whether it was true or not, whether it was still an illusion. It turned out that the old man had been haunting the walls of this county town for at least several decades. He only said that the Malanhua and Xinghua Lane had all changed from young women to old matchmakers. Qin Pingan asked, "Your name is Chong Chong? Did the last saint come to the town when he was in Liju Dongtian? Or earlier? The look you saw Malanhua in the past seems to be an old acquaintance? Have you been to the town more than once?" Chong Chong, a man with a credit knife, said, "Is it true that the well water can't violate the river water?" Qin Ping smiled and said, "Don't say a few nonsense to fool fools, just rely on you to help the Ma couple unintentionally do good to accumulate evil virtues, and we will have a chance to settle the score." Chong Chong did not deny the matter. There is an iron law in Fengdu Hades, good deeds will not be rewarded. Then the Mas and his wife wanted to serve as officials of the town god's temple smoothly after their death, relying solely on their own minds and means. It is simply wishful thinking. Chong Chong glanced at the other side of the hall and said in a deep voice, "Qin Pingan, a gentleman does something and doesn't. I advise you to stop." Qin Pingan turned his head and said, "Puliu, don't you always feel that you can't see the details of Zhongchang? Since you can't see it, just check." The old woman walked to the door, hesitating. Qin Pingan sat at the door. "I guess he is a credit swordsman at the Jindan state. As for whether Zhongchang is a swordsman, it is up to you to determine the answer." As soon as he heard that the other party might be the credit swordsman of the Mo family, Pu Liu's heart tightened, and when he heard that he might be a sword repairman, the old woman's face was ashen as a mournful concubine. Qin Ping smiled and said, "Forget it, you won't be allowed to make enemies and there must be a limit to how bad you feel." When Pu Lu heard such an empathetic words, instead of feeling relieved, he was extremely worried. In an instant, the green shirt was as misty as smoke, and in the next instant, Qin Pingan had reached out to hold Zhongchang's head, which was leaning against the wall, unable to move. Qin Ping raised his arm with 5 fingers like hooks, directly pulled the natal flying sword of the credit knife man from the key aura, and then clamped the pocket flying sword with his 2 fingers. The back of Zhongchang's head knocked a hole in the wall, and the opponent used an unimaginable and treacherous method to strip off a natal flying sword on the spot, which made Zhongchang lose his mind for a moment. Qin Ping narrowed his eyes and said, "The rank is good. If you put it on the Great Wall of Sword Qi, you can be rated as a second by the Summer Palace." Pu Lu stared blankly at the incident over there. A golden core sword immortal with a layer of Mahist identity, against Qin Zhenxian he is like a chicken cub, the difference between victory and defeat is inevitable, but Yu Zhongchang will be able to parry 1 or 2. Qin Pingan asked, "Fei Jian's name?" Zhongchang said slowly, "Evil posthumous title." Qin Pingan suddenly realized, "You, a creditor, have done a good deal. Some of the children of the Pema family are indeed very hopeful to be granted posthumous titles by the imperial court." Zhongchang said, "Qin Shanzhu relies on the realm, there are no taboos, nothing to fear?" Qin Pingan asked, "Does private posthumous title count?" Zhongchang shook his head. Qin Ping snorted, "That's why I read it wrong. This flying sword has a very low rank, and it can't even enter the C rank of the Summer Palace." Zhongchang said, "I know very well that Qin Shanzhu is the last hermit official of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, and he is in charge of sitting in the Summer Palace, so there is no need to remind me of this important status repeatedly so as not to scare me. It's interesting to say that you and I are both sword cultivators, need to scare people with words?" Qin Ping's increased the force, and the flying sword's evil posthumous post showed signs of being broken from it, and the sword repairer Zhongchang who was involved in the Tao was stirred up and suffered a lot. Zhongchang's face changed slightly. Qin Pingan smiled and said, "When I was at the top of the city, I frightened Liz Hen and Lu Bai sword cultivators to amuse them. You are still cleaning the toilet in Mafu." Zhongchang looked at the natal flying sword that had a crack in it. Qin Pingan said, "I mentioned the Great Wall of Sword Qi and the Summer Palace to you to remind you how to save yourself. For example, tell me that you have been to the Great Wall of Sword Qi before." Zhongchang said, "I went there when I was young." Qin Ping choked for a moment, fell silent for a moment and scolded his mother. Zhongchang said, "Don't you, Mr. Yingguan, verify the authenticity?" Qin Pingan was too lazy to speak, just let go of his fingers and returned Fei Jian. Zhongchang put the flying sword in his natal Qi house to nourish and refine it, took out an elixir from his sleeve, threw it into his mouth, chewed it carefully and said slowly, "I remember that Miyu was still in Yuanying state at that time. He has a nickname of Meeting the Waste, and I have seen him draw a sword from afar on the battlefield, and his reputation is well deserved. Chen Ping waved his hand. He'll talk about this debt later. You can leave the capital of Yushuan Kingdom. As for the debt owed to you by the Ma family in Xinghua Lane, how to collect the debt in the future is up to you. Chong Chang asked. Just because I have been to the Great Wall of Sword, Chen Jianxian, who is already on the verge of going mad, has become so talkative? Qin Pingan smiled and said, the old man has such a stinky mouth, he must have been beaten in the Great Wall of Sword Qi, right? Chong Chang said, there will be a period later. Qin Pingan said, no need. Zhong Chang glanced at the two coffins on the other side of the main room. Qin Pingan asked, are you going to help me to intercede? It's not impossible. You Chong Chang have been to the Great Wall of Sword Qi twice? Chong Chang said, if I remember correctly, there used to be an old man in your hometown who often used it to scare children. Men and women sacrificed the kiln, and the porcelain fired from this kiln will be more vivid. Qin Ping smiled and said, as expected of a sword cultivator who has been to the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Chong Chang looked dazed. It's a pity that I couldn't say a word to the boss sword immortal. The next moment, Zhong Chang left the town, but it was not the Wuxia Lane Ma mansion where he returned to, but a back alley near the Yongjia County government. On the side of Xinghua Lane, the two survivors, Ma Yan and Qin Zheng, were strangled by Qin Pingan and dragged all the way to the Golden Goose kiln outside the town, where they were thrown into the kiln fire. Just like Xiao Xing leaked the secret to Yu Qin, Qin Pingan really carefully created a series of fantasy worlds, roughly divided into main volume and subvolume. For example, Qin Pingan built another Great Wall of Sword Qi. This is the place where Qin Pingan traveled repeatedly alone. In addition to the city, the Sword Fairy's private residence outside the city is also vivid. But there are only mansions, streets and alleys here, but no one. Huaihuan County, but 3 places are missing: Nipping Lane, Old School and Yang Family Medicine Store. Imitation of Baiyujing. Beiju is the boundary of Luzhou Ghost Creature Valley. There is also a ruins of Luzhou Xinfu in Beiju, but the Taoist temple on the top of the mountain is missing. This place was named Xingting 6 by Qin Pingan, a capital city of Yushuan Kingdom. The construction of this place is of course due to Wu Di, a Taoist priest who set up a stall. These are all on the list. The main book of Heaven and Earth, a total of 36. Previously, I took Xiaoma to visit the Yaolu in Tonggishao town, during which I saw 12 phantom worlds carried by 12 sycamore leaves. These all belong to the subbook world. There are 72 in total. The largest is the imitation Baiyujing with 5 cities and 12 floors. It's just that it's still very rough for the time being. According to the lingo of antique shops, it's just a fake look. The one with the smallest area is the Lugong Temple where Qin Pingan and Lu Qin competed in acting skills. Because the site is small, it looks more open and more authentic than the real one. In a riverside fish market located in a prefecture on the border of Hongxing country, Ma Bai lifted up the red hijab of the beautiful woman with a phoenix crown and shape. He actually knew that her elder brother Ma Chuan also liked her, but she liked herself. This kind of thing cannot be modest. The brothers partnered to open a martial arts gym. In addition to opening the gym to recruit disciples to earn a little money, the horses have no night grass or fat, and they also take turns walking darts. After more than 10 years of hard work, each has earned a wealthy family. In fact, these years the emperor has been ignorant, his relatives are in power, and the price of selling officials and nobles is clearly marked. The people are not living well and it is not easy to travel outside. It's just that Ma Chuan went back to his home when he walked the darts last time. Those martial arts students who also served as dart masters seemed to have lost their souls. It turned out that they passed 2 rural villages and they were full of corpses. Killed by a sharp weapon, not to mention his elder brother Ma Chuan was scared out of his wits. Ma Bi's scalp became numb just listening to this. The key is to judge the bandit by looking at the unattended bones. According to his elder brother, the strikers are extremely well trained, and they are by no means comparable to ordinary horse thieves and rogues. The brothers made up their minds in private and felt that it was necessary to move their family to Fuqing as soon as possible. After all, there was a saying in their hometown that if there is a small chaos, avoid the city, and if there is a big chaos, avoid the village. After all, no matter how chaotic the world is, it won't be so chaotic and full of gunpowder and chaos, right? On this day, a convoy went to Fuqing. Of course it took the official route. A group of young martial arts disciples escorted them, and the head of the bodyguard was an old man named Shen Ke. A feathered arrow pierced through the air, piercing Shen Ke's head in an instant. In the past, dozens of young and strong old people who could not get close were killed on the spot and fell off the horse's back. In the distance of the official road, there appeared a well-armored elite cavalry blocking the road. Someone sat high on the horse's back, twisted an arrow from the quiver, drew the bow like a full moon, and pointed at the horse from afar. It seemed that a rider beside him said something. This time the arrows shot by the fine rider were no longer aimed at the head or chest. Most of the arrows were accurately nailed into the abdomen or legs of Ma Bai and his party. Afterwards, the fine horse galloped up or drew its knife out of its sheath and added a knife, or held a long spear, and stabbed the shoulder or the palm of the hand, still deliberately not causing fatal injuries. Ma Bai's shoulders were flattened and his entire arm was chopped off. In an instant, blood poured out. Ma Bai staggered, just in time to see his brother Ma Chuan being shot into his crotch. Take Ma Chuan a few feet away. Ma Bai's only remaining arm was chopped off by the next rider, and then the third rider who was familiar with bow horses reached out and grabbed the bun. Ma Bai's feet were off the ground and he was dragged backwards just like that. Ma Bai looked at in the gray sky these bandits, officers and soldiers who carelessly ignore human life? This world. Before he died, Ma Chuan had only one obsession, that it would be great if there were ghosts in the world. As long as he became a ghost, he must avenge them. Wearing a crown of white horns, the green-clothed maidservant named Xuanhuan followed the old woman on horseback to the other party's humble house with a dull expression. In the end, she saw a woman in a sarong who was cleaning up the dishes, and that sitting at the table humming a little song. Ma Chuan. When Ma Chuan saw her, she had a different charm with his own wife. If they were sleeping together. Ma Chuan felt a little hot when he thought of this and began to beat around the bush, showing that he was the private tutor of Mr. Zhao's family, a wealthy family. A scholar with a serious reputation. Xuanhuan didn't like Ma Chuan and Qiu Yun's flirtatiousness at all. Hearing Ma Chuan's flamboyant words and that unruly scorching gaze, an unknown fire ignited in her heart. Directly poked Ma Chuan's eyes blind. She snorted coldly and lightly shook the blood on her fingers, not looking at the poor man who was rolling all over the floor, howling ghosts and howling, and that seemingly gentle and cowardly woman. She was just curled up on the kong, mending old clothes under the lamp, lowering her head and biting a piece of thread. She was worried about her husband being blind. How could she become a school teacher tomorrow, and earn the monthly salary of 8 renminbi, and she would have to live a miserable life of being so poor that she couldn't solve the problem for a long time. The old woman sighed, provoked the wick and repeated the same old tune. The girl was wrong again. Xuanhuan's eyes blurred and she stood outside the hut again, and the old woman pushed the door open again and said with a smile, "The girl has arrived and the humble house is simple, so don't dislike it." The female sword attendant named Qiuyun from the Ma mansion could no longer tell who she was. Changing identities several times, it seems like a lifetime away. In the latest previous life, she was a person who fell from a building whose family suffered catastrophe on a rainy night and could not bear the humiliation. She is now in a mansion of a wealthy family. The houses are connected to each other, and there are corridors on all sides. In rainy and snowy weather she does not need to open an umbrella, and her shoes do not get wet when she walks in it. The good world of singing and dancing to promote peace. The family sings and sings every night, the banquets are endless, the dishes are delicious and delicate, and the delicacies that cannot be eaten, and the delicious wines that are as moist as the throat, are too numerous to count. She is the daughter-in-law of the eldest son. Her father's surname is Zhao. She seems to be a wealthy gentry, and I heard that the family will soon hire a school teacher named Ma, who is the husband of her embroidered lady hired by the family. And the embroidered lady, who still has the charm, has often met her these years and taught her, the daughter of the Zhao family. Although she lived in her boudoir, she also heard some gossips behind her back, saying that the embroidered lady had an unclear relationship with many men in the house, so that she walked out of a certain place with messy hair from time to time. Need to change clothes. At the moment, Zhao Qiuyun is being served by a maidservant, dressing up in front of the mirror. The beauty in the mirror has a round skin, fair skin, thin and curved eyebrows and plump skin. The maid beside her wears Chui Ru, whose name is Yueme. In the palace of the Red Apricot Kingdom, the imperial lady who was lucky enough to enter the palace to meet the empress, saw the man in the dragon robe lift up the curtain, and they all took off their skirts and piled them on their ankles. There is still a woman smiling coquettishly and calling Your Majesty, picking up her clothes with her toes. Only the female #1 scholar couldn't speak. She showed a look of fear. This time she didn't try to explain who she is in various ways. She ran straight to the door, even though she was dragged by women or eunuchs several times before and back. It's better than waiting here to die. Life is worse than death. This time she ran a long distance but bumped into someone in the imperial garden. She looked up, couldn't help being surprised, and vaguely remembered his identity. She hurriedly gestured with her fingers and wrote 4 characters in the air. "Sir, save me." Unexpectedly, the middle-aged scribe who seemed to be the teacher of his own school, just reached out and grabbed her slender hand, persuading her, "Learn literary and martial arts and you will be the emperor's family. You are the #1 female scholar, and if you become a concubine, wouldn't it be the best of both worlds? Guangzhong Yaozu?" She subconsciously called out the other party's name and angrily said, "Jianghu, you are simply a beast." The middle-aged scribe suddenly smiled and said, "Who do you think those imperial wives are? You really can't remember them? Which one is not the woman you miss day and night? Which one is not the mistress in your mind?" On HD Road, there is an inn by the side of the road, and there is an old pagoda tree in the courtyard, with luxuriant branches and leaves, dark green soaked in window screens. A middle-aged Taoist priest was holding a dust whisk in his hand and carrying a copper coin sword. The Taoist sat cross-legged under the eaves, waiting patiently for the shopkeeper to cook a pot of yellow rice. The 2 new guests are both scholars who came to Beijing to rush for the exam. They put down their salute bags in their respective rooms, and saw that the middle-aged Taoist priest was quite immoral, so they became interested in chatting. The Taoist turned his head, stroked his beard and said with a smile, "You Taoist, you brother Yenshan, don't come here without any harm." Yu Shiwu stretched out his hand to touch the space between his eyebrows. For some reason he felt a headache. Ma Yenshan wondered, could it be that the Taoist priest recognizes us? Or is it the magic of the fairy family who has not predicted the prophet? The Taoist twisted his beard and said, "The poor Taoist recognizes your predecessors." Ma Yenshan naturally didn't believe this kind of nonsense and joked, "Is the Taoist priest the so-called expert in the world?" The Taoist waved his whisk, pointed to a nest of ants under the acacia tree, changed his hands on the whisk and said slowly, "Buddhist consciousness only school attaches great importance to the cultivation of the seeds of initiation. When it comes to all species, its establishment seeds are intended to break all kinds of false plans such as one cause of many causes and no causes of heretics. The first volume of the Langa Sutra talks about 2 kinds of smoke, and the second volume of Mahayana commentary explains that all dharmas are born and destroyed according to that defilement. Alaya consciousness has the causal nature capable of giving birth to all dharmas, which is called xuanxia. The verse in the quotation says that all dharmas are born of xuanxia, and all dharmas come from one another, different familiarity and turning consciousness, and they are born by each other. Awakening Faith, on, talks about the meaning of fumigation just like the clothes in the world do not have fragrance. If people fumigate them with incense, they will have fragrance. The so-called fumigation refers to the seeds that the first 7 consciousnesses drop in the field of Alaya consciousness. Like many plants in this world, they form seeds and fall into the soil. There are many people who die from the evil realms and die in the evil realms as much as the earth, and those who die from the evil realms and die in the good realms are as few as the soil on the claws. Therefore the human body is rare, and after death people fall into the earth. Those who are in the 3 evil ways are like the earth, and those who can get a human body are like the soil on the claws. I once saw a story in the miscellaneous Agama Sutra. Head, there is driftwood in the sea, there is only one hole, drifting on the waves, going east and west with the wind. The Buddha told Ananda, the blind tortoise driftwood, although it is wrong again and again, it may be found again. It is very difficult for a foolish ordinary person to drift in the 5 realms and temporarily return to the human body. Hey, the Tiwei Sutra also said that if a person is on the Mount Sumeru with a thin thread, and the other person is holding a needle shadow, there is a swirling haze and a strong wind, and the blowing thread is difficult to enter the needle hole, and the human body is extremely rare. Therefore, the rareness of a human body can roughly be understood as a dilemma. In terms of quantity, beings in the evil realms are like the earth, and beings in the good realms are like the soil on nails. In terms of possibility, getting a human body is like a blind turtle drilling a floating hole in the sea. The human body is already rare. Human life is hard to come by again. Yu Shiwu sighed. I remembered it all. The township and dreams are narrow, the water and the sky are wide, and the bright moon is cool and the precious fan is free. I have a way to get rid of doubts. If you want to stop drinking, keep your eyes open and see the intoxicated. The middle-aged Taoist pointed at the locust tree with his whisk and said with a smile, Huaihuangzu Hongxing country, the ants in that nest are all named Ma. Sword of Coming Chapter 12:14. Chapter 12:14. Gukan chatted well with the old Jindan who was the national teacher. He was airless and witty, so they hit it off and some chatted. They sat together on the threshold of the hall. There was no hostile atmosphere at all. Sure enough, the maids brought the food carefully prepared by the imperial dining room. They only dared to take a long look at the sacred young man in Confucian shirt, and then walked lightly, silently, like a cat walking at night, with their heads down. Outside the gate of the main hall, Huang Lai took 2 food boxes. Gukan thanked them with a smile. The old man said that the food boxes left here don't matter, he will deal with them himself, and they quietly retreated next. The old man just ate a piece of pastry and stopped. The reason was that he could not eat too sweet and it would stick to his teeth. Gukan was munching on the delicious food in the palace. The old man grabbed a flea from his body, twitched his fingers lightly and snapped as if every time he pulled a flea out of his body, he uttered a wordless complaint. Huang Lai, who has been the national teacher of Yushuan Kingdom for decades, said to himself that he thinks it is very interesting to touch lice in front of officials and gentlemen. Gukan nodded in agreement. It was very elegant. The old man asked Gukan if he was the Master Lu of the Longquan sword sect. Gukan smiled and shook his head and said no. The reason was that Master Lu was not as easy talking as himself. The palace has long been in trouble. For example, Lu Xianying would directly block the door of Yu and Shuepeng before. Huang Lai was even more uncertain about the identity of the young man in front of him, talking about Lu Zongzhu with such a casual tone. It can't be the one from Piyun Mountain, right? Absolutely impossible. Could it be from Mi De Jiangxian, who has a long sword spirit? I heard that this hidden official from the Summer Palace, a lineage of jade sword cultivator, came to Haoran Tianxia, and now he is in a fairyland. Does it mean that the water and soil of our Haoran Tianxia is not much worse than the Great Wall of Sword Qi? Gukan seems to have guessed the old man's mind, but she is still not in a hurry to report her family name. Yushuan Kingdom is located in Aquarius Continent, which is a small country that can't be high enough to be low, and because it is one of the vassal states of the Great Li dynasty, it depends on others. Huang Lai's title of national teacher is just an empty show, saying that one person is worth less than 10,000 people. The national teacher who is above the people is nothing more than the word golden pill, that was hired by the Shui family to support the scene. After all, it is completely different from the embroidered Chui Chan to the Song family of the Dali dynasty. It is not only the level of the two parties, the disparity seems to be very different, and it is because the national teacher Chui Chan is looking for trouble when he has nothing to do, and Huang Lai is hiding when he has something to do. Of course, Huang Lai still admires the embroidered tiger from the bottom of his heart. The reason is very simple. In the eyes of the old man, without the Dali Iron Cavalry and the national teacher Chui Qin, Aquarius Continent with hundreds of countries is more than just a country without a country, and people are not as good as ghosts. After all, a watchdog in a peaceful and prosperous world lives more like a person in a troubled world. Personal. Uemo felt that it was not a problem to always sit relatively idle, so Huang Lai found a lame conversation starter and asked tentatively, "How did fellow Taoist get to know Master Qin Shan?" Gukan answered irrelevantly, "When I was young and ignorant, I heard someone tell me a truth that I thought was too big and empty at the time. He said that it might not be really interesting to be an accountant who makes calculations and deals with numbers all day long, but at least you can work hard. Having fun in the middle of the day is as small as calculating the daily expenses of a small sect, as large as studying the records of a sect on a mountain, or even a country, and you can discover a lot of hidden knowledge that is easily overlooked by people. Thoroughly, you can see through the clouds and mists gradually the spirit of a country, the trajectory of its rise and fall, and the traces of its policies. The context is a clear wheel track. When we are willing to pay patience and listen carefully, we can clearly hear the thunder of how history came and where it is going." Huang Lai thought about it for a while and found that it was indeed an unheard of novelty. The old man turned his head and looked at the many palaces and sighed, "Of course the idea is very good, but it is simple to say but difficult to implement. If you have great perseverance and great skills, you will be able to use it. This feat cannot be accomplished. The threshold for this matter is too high. How many people in a country can have access to these confidential files, and casually browse through the account books of a country's household department?" Gukan was non-committal and just laughed it off. Nipping Lane in the small town, Luapa Mountain in the west, Xianxia Island and Shujian Lake, the small wine shop and summer palace in the Great Wall of Sword Qi, plus the Qingping sword sect of Tongyi's Hao today. Huang Lai glanced at Gukan's Confucian shirt attire and asked with a smile, "Fellow Taoist, don't you think so?" Gukan said with a smile, "The most holy teacher said, scholars are determined by the Tao, and the sages of later generations have added some relatively pragmatic principles. The predecessors are doing a backward push of the result, and this matter is naturally it suddenly became extremely difficult, and it is easy for people to take this matter too seriously, and it is inevitable that they will be regarded as timid, which is even more difficult. Huang Lai nodded. Fellow Taoists are right, you have been educated. Gukin said, your junior said something offensive, the old man seems to be a bit of a misnomer when he is this national teacher? Huang Lai said with a hearty smile, what kind of offensive words are these? It's a good thing to say that I'm not doing my job properly and squatting in a latrine without shitting. Gukin said, at the end of the day the Shui family of Yushuan Kingdom can't really make the best use of everything, and doesn't know how to use people to do things. Huang Lai smiled and said, it's not fun to say such things. Gukin said, it's okay, the blame is on me. Huang Lai sighed, as the old saying goes, you are neither deaf nor dumb and you are not a writer. Gukin nodded, every family has scriptures that are difficult to recite. Huang Lai sighed for no reason. Taoism has Taoist methods, Buddhism has Buddhist practices, and Confucianism has Confucian living methods. You Confucians must make the framework of the real world clear and clear. I want people to be able to use it without learning. The context is traditional, and the torch is passed on from generation to generation. One generation has a generation's research and problems, and each generation has a generation's entrustment. Therefore, scholars inside and outside the temple are willing to use the people who entrust their lives self-proclaimed. Presumably fellow Taoists are the same? Gukin said with a smile, Senior, you're thinking about it. I'm not a serious scholar. For me, being polite and following the rules is completely a last resort. Huang Lai asked, have you ever suffered a loss? Gukin nodded and said, in this matter I stumbled and suffered a lot, and then I grew a little memory. Someone said that the most stupid person in the world is the one who suffers for nothing. Huang Lai smiled without saying a word. He has lived a long time and he can still understand some hidden meanings. The someone that Gukin called before and the someone now must be the Lord Qinshan. Immediately afterwards, Gukin said something that made the old man puzzled. The decisive battle between the two countries is not limited to the battlefield, and the confrontation between the two armies is not limited to warriors. Gukin explained, you can replace the two countries with good and evil, and replace the two armies with yourself and others. Huang Lai smacked his mouth, stretched out his palm against his chin, it's a bit chewy. Huang Lai asked with a smile, fellow Taoist, we chatted pretty well so we can't get to the bottom of it, what is it about? Gukin closed the food box, clapped her hands and said with a smile, my name is Gukan, and I'm from the same town as Qin Pingan, and we both live in Nipping Lane. Huang Lai was stunned and speechless, as if he had been hit by a sap, and his heart was shaken. Isn't that madman Gukan the direct disciple of Zheng Zhuzhong in Baidi City, busy making contributions in other continents? And according to the gossip on Beipingza Mountain, didn't everyone say that Qin Pingan and Gukan had already broken up completely? It seems that they broke up unhappy in Shujian Lake back then, and had a dismal ending of never getting in touch with each other? That's why later when Luopishan and his party visited Zhengyangshan, there was the sword fairy Lu Xianying, but Gukan was absent. This is indeed the case, one is a closed disciple of the lineage of Wensheng, and the other is the direct descendant of a giant in the way of magic. After squandering everything, the two sides will definitely go farther and have no books. According to common sense, such two people who have reached the top of their own cultivation will meet each other on the road in the future. Gukin covered her sleeves with both hands, squinted her eyes and asked with a smile, I heard that it was me. Senior was surprised? The old man also put his hands into his sleeves in a decent manner, but he quickly took them out and said angrily, it's also the sleeves with hands and sleeves. If you do it, you will look like a nobleman. If I do it, I can only do it like a peasant with a rustic hat. Gukin laughed out loud. Gukin said, Huang Lai, can we discuss something? Huang Lai shuddered and immediately said decisively, Qi practitioners kill the emperor, but the taboo is the taboo among the taboos. Nowadays, the Confucian temple has strict rules, and they will be arrested and sent to the academy to eat prison food. Now absolutely no. What's more, the Emperor Shui is my employer after all, I can't do this kind of ungrateful behavior. Gukin, if you are determined to kill here, I will definitely not be able to change anything. I will pay for my life for this. To be honest, I was not willing to part with it, so I had no choice but to bite the bullet and stop me. You can beat me until I vomit blood and then faint. Can be regarded as a somewhat passable confession. Gukin couldn't help laughing. Senior is quick to talk. Huang Lai asked suspiciously, isn't this the case? Gukin said, I am not a fool. With my current state, it is far from enough for me to wrestle with the rules of the Confucian temple. The thing I want to discuss with you is because I think We have a good chat. Instead of receiving a tight salary from the Shui family of Yushuan Kingdom every year, Huang Lai, the national teacher, would rather vacate the cage to change the bird, change to a mountain, get a new identity, earn immortal money and practice Taoism without delay. Huang Lai frowned and said, "What mountain, what identity? Wouldn't it be that I, a genealogy monk with a clean background, would go to the White Emperor city of Middle-earth to make a living?" Changing the family genealogy, Huang Lai thought that his skin was not thick enough. Besides, the outside world said that there are so many strange people and strangers in Baidi City. He, a Jindan cultivator, entered Baidi City. Even with Gukan's guidance and foreshadowing, he would really be able to eat delicious food, drink spicy food and lie down to enjoy the blessings? In the capital of Yushuan Kingdom, among other things, Huang Lai can at least sleep peacefully every day. Gukan stood up and said slowly, "I invite you to a new sect without red tape to serve as a named offering. Don't worry, it's the kind of real power offering that has seats in the Patriarch Hall. I can assure you that if you don't want to do anything, you can be free. If you want to do things, you will be very busy. It depends on your own wishes, Huang Lai." In addition, as the meeting ceremony of the suzerain, it is 2 or 3 Taoist secrets that make Huang Lai hopeful to become a nascent soul monk, and find a chance to be among the top 5 in the future. As for whether you can break through the realm in the end or even go one step further, practice is ultimately your own business, and it's not a child's play. No one can guarantee that you will be able to cross 1 or 2 big steps. Huang Lai got up subconsciously. "I have to ask, fellow Taoists are so sincere, why do you like me?" Gukan said with a smile, "On the one hand, you are pleasing to the eye. On the other hand, you feel that your golden core bottleneck is not unbreakable, but just lacks opportunities and resources. A nascent soul cultivator, no matter where he is, they are still relatively valuable. For example, my first master, Zhejiang Jinjuan Lu Jimao, he has been a nascent soul immortal for many years. He was in Shujian Lake back then. A big man like an emperor." Huang Lai asked cautiously, "Fellow Taoist, are you ready to start a sect?" Gukan nodded and said in a heartfelt voice, "Senior brother and I will keep silent, and each will take his own account and take a group of people from Baidi City. Baidi City will soon become an empty city. Make a next sect." Huang Lai said, "What if I reject the invitation of fellow Taoist?" Gukan said, "Don't worry, there will be no consequences. A twisted melon is not sweet. To tell the truth, what do you care about with a golden elixir now? It's a loss. If you and I say goodbye today, it's nothing more than going our separate ways, but in the future it will be difficult for you to join after that sect has improved. Of course, Huang Lai can stay here to eat and wait for death. Whether he can break through or not is up to fate, but he can live a comfortable and peaceful life. The right is that the rich man is looking for a place to retire. Of course, you can also bet on the gambling table. Zongman, take a big gamble, pursue the true Tao, and see if you can add another upper 5-level monk to Aquarius continent in the future." Huang Lai stared at Gukan's face with gleaming eyes, and the old man smiled and said, "It's a good thing that there is no such store in this village? Since everyone says that the tree is moved, the dead are moved, and the dead are moved, then I beseech you. A request." Gukan asked abruptly with playful eyes, "Aren't you afraid that I'm lying to you?" Huang Lai was stunned at first, then smiled and said, "Since Gu Zongzhu and xuanhuan are still friends and there is a big deviation from the rumors outside, there must be a bottom line in doing things." Gukan's face was sullen. She muttered in a low voice, and scolded her mother in her hometown dialect. Huang Lai, who was a bit worried at first, felt relieved after seeing this scene. For some reason, the old man felt that he had made the right bet this time. Huang Lai used the title of Gu Zongzhu again and asked curiously, "Just ask me, why didn't you go to Luapa Mountain but went to Baidi City instead?" Gukan asked back, "Are there any differences?" Huang Lai didn't know how to answer for a moment. Gukan smiled and said, "It is said in the book that if you have a good neighbor, you will see a gentleman every day. The savage female cultivator whose Taoist name is Chunxiao and whose alias is Gu Lingyan, she still pretends to be a ghost at the Qin Tianjian, and she never tires of it. However, she also knew her strengths. She was able to fool the 3 supervisors by relying on her high level. It may not be because they were not smart enough. Ever since she followed Gukan as a personal maid, it is reasonable to say that it is rare for her to come out to let the wind go, and she has a moment of freedom which should be a bit relaxing, but instead she thinks about the palace from time to time, whether there is a fight, whether there is any excitement to watch." This made Gu Lingyu laugh at himself in his heart. "Ha, cats and rice bowls, dogs and owners. The mountains are so high that there are few people. According to legend, An ancient immortal ordered Wu Ding to open a straight road in the dangerous place where the mountains are winding and the peaks are like swords. Later, some emperors planted ancient cypresses beside the road, the trees were full of shade, and the road was like a corridor of emerald clouds. For 2,000 years, there is a plank road leaning against dangerous peaks and facing torrents below. The predecessors drilled holes on this wall to frame wood and built a narrow plank road. An ancient-looking young man walked along it, holding a 7-hole bone flute. It was ground from the ulnar bone of a crane, and a golden slip of sin was hung on the waist. In the abandoned ancient inn with the name of Raising Pens, the young man who had enlightened the 5 gods in history stopped. Since then he has been a man of great powers and attained the Tao. Of course he knows that this is abnormal, but for 2,000 years he can only for clues in the world alone, searching for a certain truth, but he has never been able to find out. The young man sighed and stepped into the dilapidated old inn. He, who is good at geomantic skills, knew in advance that this place was quite mysterious. It seemed to be another talisman crossing set up by a fellow man. He had traveled alone for a long time and he had already discovered it. In this world there seems to be such unowned buildings left everywhere. If there is a pavilion at the foot of the mountain for the common people to rest their feet, then there is a ferry in the middle of the mountain, which seems to be specially used to help chi refiners cross the mountains and rivers. Sure enough, the next moment there were ripples and the scene around him changed instantly. When the boy's footsteps landed, this ancient immortal who still didn't know his name came to another mountain that was thousands of miles away. In a Taoist temple there are 5 old men with different expressions, and they are looking at a huge scroll that is spread out. There are so many blanks in the painting, only yin and yang fish are painted. Seeing the uninvited young real person, the 5 old men wanted to fight poetry with him. The young man laughed dumbly, glanced at the yin and yang fish on the scroll, and didn't bother to chat nonsense with those arty mountain spirits. A puff of smoke jumped into the picture scroll, and then came to a bustling market. The young man seemed to be in a water town, surrounded by houses in the shape of a seal. According to local customs, when marrying a daughter, one must ride. There are at least 3 bridges for the colorful boats decorated with lights: Fulu Bridge, Xuanhuan Bridge and Xianxia Bridge. The young man passed by a time-honored soy sauce garden that had been sold for thousands of miles. The open-air drying area covered a huge area, and there were huge sauce vats lined up vertically and horizontally. According to a rough estimate, there were at least 2,000. The strong aroma of soy sauce wafted through his nostrils. The young man looked around casually, his gaze pierced the walls and across the house, and he saw a well-matched couple. After the marriage, the harp played harmoniously. On this day, the newlywed woman spread paper and rubbed ink, and the man was drawing a small 3-foot painting. However, there are as many as 500 or 600 words in the inscription and postscript. The neighbor's tall gate is full of flowers, and there is a crepe myrtle plant in the courtyard. The villagers don't know how expensive it is. From the eyes of the young immortal, it seems that it is about to become a fine plant. And in this old house, there is a large pile of IOUs written on the desk in the study, and an old man who is about to die is throwing those IOUs into the brazier. The unworthy descendants outside the door, watching this scene, gritted their teeth one by one, widened their eyes. The eye sockets were covered with red threads, full of resentment, but they dared not show it. Seeing this, the young immortal sighed and walked into an alley, where there was a strong young man who set up a stall to swindle money, squatting on the side of the road with his hands in his sleeves, yawning. Sword of Coming Chapter 12:15. Chapter 12:15. On the border of the 100,000 mountains, one old and one young, Yu Jin hovered, not daring to cross the thunder pool for half a step. It was the old deaf boy who sneaked back to his hometown, said a few words from his heart, and asked if he could settle down in the senior dojo and boldly discuss something. As a result, the old blind man was not willing to talk to him at all. This is very aggrieved. I took the initiative to visit the door, and got a silent rejection. The old deaf boy didn't dare to trespass in this area, so he could only stare blankly. It was Ning Yao who asked for help so that the old deaf boy could lead his apprentice into this lifeless and lonely land, and landed on the top of the lonely peak like 1,000 mountains to worship. Yu Yu, the disciple of Lao Deaf, is a sword cultivator from the Great Wall of Sword Chi, and is about to form alchemy. The speed of breaking through the realm is really not too slow. After all, it was the sword fairy embryo that the boss gave to the old deaf child himself. Ning Yao went out to entertain guests, followed by a red-cheeked girl in a sable hat, belching generously. In the old days of the Great Wall of Sword Chi, in the prison where the old deaf son was sitting, Besides the criminal officer Hao Su who was employing his salary, there were also two maids, Chang Ming and Ji Qin, who were the world's golden spirits. Copper money and Gu Yuqian's ancestral money incarnation, and finally under the matching of the boss sword fairy, Hao Su accepted Du Shanin as his apprentice, and Lao Defer accepted Yu Yu as his apprentice. Ning Yao remembered something and asked, "Old Def, what's your name?" When Xiego heard the prologue of this long-lost reunion, he only felt that the great wall of sword chi that he missed after sleeping was really a custom of loving each other. But the old deaf child didn't care, grinning and said, "Miss Ning, don't ask, I almost forgot my real name. It's called Gon Tang and I have an old Dao name, Dragon Voice. After being away from home for too long, the Taoist temple is Fuyu Mountain in the wild world, and its reputation is not obvious, far inferior to Taoist temples such as Xinzan City and Diyue Qingshan. After the war ended, the boss sword immortal gave him extra favors, and the old deaf boy who had no merit but hard work got a free body. This time he returned home, he didn't dare to go to the dojo to see for fear of being caught straight, he would go on his own. In this life it was indeed miserable enough. At the beginning I couldn't stand the instigation of my old friends, and thought that my sword skills were not weak, so I wanted to run to wrestle with Chen Qingdu, but in the end I was pulled by the great wall of sword chi to make up for it. Got a prisoner. If you finally get out of trouble and then get blocked by Chuxing or Firen, wouldn't it be a disaster? What's more, I have an oil bottle by my side, so I feel uncomfortable after all. If I really want to fight with Ascension Realm, I will inevitably be tied up. After all, it is the disciple who was given to me by the boss sword immortal. If I lost my life in the wild world, the old deaf child would feel guilty in his heart. This is not hypocritical. In the Great Wall of Sword Chi as a wild monster, he was able to rank among the top 10 sword immortals. This honor has been unique for thousands of years. For this point, the old deaf child has to read Chen Qingdu well. Of course, if he could beat Chen Qingdu, he would be fine. Ning Yao and that young hidden official are really a perfect match. They belong to two extremes of life. A sword cultivator who was born and raised on the Great Wall of Sword Chi didn't even know his name. A foreigner, but he even knows the customs of Fuyu Mountain area clearly. Yu Yu and Du Shanin are the same age. Du Shanin has never been convinced by Qin Pingon, but Yu Yu regards the young hermit as an unattainable figure. It is a pity that during this trip, he followed the master all the way to hide his head at the end. I didn't hear too much news about Chen Yingguan. Ning Yao asked curiously, "What are you doing here this time? Now that the old deaf child has returned to his hometown, why come here to make trouble for himself?" If it is said that a monk on the top of the Howran mountain has been attached to the wilderness for many years, he would probably be scolded to death when he returned to his hometown, but in the wilderness world, what happened to the old deaf child? Is it still a good story? After all, Lao Def was once one of the 10 peak sword celestial beings who were eligible to participate in the discussions at the head of the Great Wall of Sword Chi, and he was also the only monster sword cultivator. The old deaf child laughed and said, "I want to find a more stable place to stand. I don't need to calculate and calculate. Fighting and killing, it seems like I have my head tied to my trouser belt all day long. Miss Ning, do you have any suggestions?" In the past, when the wilderness attacked Howran fiercely, he had to stay at the Great Wall of Sword Chi. Now Howran is launching a big battle to counterattack the wilderness. Could it be that he is still in the same situation? The old deaf child felt too bad. Ning Yao knew it in his heart and said with a smile, "If you want to go to the colorful world, just say so." The old deaf boy went down the donkey, rubbed his hands together and said, "That's kind." The first choice is of course the colorful world where the sky and the ground don't matter. When the door opens next time, Chi practitioners from other worlds, regardless of their status or realm, can go there. Then there is the 100,000 mountains. The only problem is the high threshold. After all, that old blind man has no shortage of thugs. Anyone who knows what will happen to Tao Ting understands it. The last choice is to go to Namba Suajo to seek refuge with Qi Tingji and hang out with the Dragon Elephant Sword Sect. It is probably not difficult, but deep down in the heart of the old deaf child, he is not particularly willing to give that guy the nickname Qi Shanglu as a favor. So if there is a choice, it is the best to replace Qi Tingji with Dong San, and they will definitely be able to chat. Ning Yao asked, "Didn't you think about going to Luapa Mountain?" The old deaf boy with a shriveled neck, yellow and thin face, wrinkled his old face, looked extremely awkward, gritted his teeth, shook his head vigorously and said, No, I am too sensitive as a monster. The Great Wall, of course, it doesn't matter if you go to Luapa Mountain and Aquarius Island, it's easy to cause the Lord Yingguan to be scolded in vain. Even though he knew that Ning Girl was the young hermit's best friend, the old deaf boy didn't dare to say a word of politeness on this matter. That kid is deeper than Tingji and his thoughts are not like a young man's. When he gets along with him, he has to worry about it every day. What's more, that Luapa Mountain is obviously a place of right and wrong. He wanted to leave the wild world because he wanted to avoid right and wrong, so there was no reason for him to jump into the fire pit with a pole. It's interesting to chat with Chen Pingon for nothing, but it's not necessary to work under this kid. God knows how many Confucian temple sages and various forces are staring at that desolate mountain, and Chen Pingon, who holds the title of hermit official. If I went, why would I say it? But don't hide in the quilt and fart will be recorded by someone. The old blind man walked out of the hut with his hands behind his hands. Don't be shameless. Ning Yao was a little puzzled. She mentioned it casually. She remembered that Senior Jitsi had no close relationship with Chen Pingon. For a moment, Gan Tang couldn't tell what the old 14th realm was thinking. Xiego was afraid that the world would not be chaotic, so he stood beside him and said, "Look at your posture and listen to your tone. Does this old man look down on our Luapa Mountain?" Gan Tang couldn't see the depth of the ermine hat girl's morality, so he asked in doubt, "Dare to ask you?" Xiego said with a stern face, "I am the new capable officer of the Mountain Lord, and I am the first enshrined in the Patriarch Hall of Jisa Peak." The old blind man sneered and said, "The identity of the monster clan is nothing. For example, her name is Bai Jing, one of the old guys who was woken up by Bai Zhe, who dares to criticize Chen Pingon. What's more, besides Bai Jing there are other people in Luoluo Mountain. There is that wild sword cultivator who brewed wine in Luobaetan with Bixiao Cave Master back then, but now he has an unfamiliar alias. Hey, if you add Taoist Gantang, wouldn't it be full of heroes to participate in the grand event, soaring all over the place? Go to a demon the clan is to scold, to go to 2 is to be afraid, to go to 3 is not to respect Luapa Mountain? The old blind man talked about one monster clan. Fortunately he didn't add the suffix of animal. Gantang's face changed slightly, and he carefully glanced at the girl in the ermine hat. Be good, is she really that notorious aunt in ancient times who likes to human names? As for the ancient sword cultivator whose name was changed to Stranger, his reputation is not small. He is a master who likes to fight. The key is that I heard that this senior has a habit of only picking what he can't beat when he asks a sword, a hero. Why did everyone go to Luapa Mountain? Lord Yingguan is a good abductor. The old blind man reminded, the golden opportunity of 1,000 years is right in front of us. After passing this village, this shop will disappear. Gan Tang immediately changed his mind and said along the way, "You can go there, why can't you go? I think that Luapa Mountain is the ashram of Lord Yingguan, and it's not a mountain of swords and seas of fire. It's a good thing. Senior, you have spoken harshly. If I don't go to Luapa Mountain, I'm afraid that I won't be able to get out of the 100,000 mountains, and the result will be worse than touting. If there were Bai Jing and that stranger standing in front of Luapa Mountain, could this matter really be discussed?" He only said that if he had the opportunity to ask the 2 of them about swordsmanship, the benefit of the Great Way is probably not a matter of money. The boss sword fairy once gave him a sword manual in private, just because of his identity as a demon clan. Even if the old deaf son studied it painstakingly, he still didn't get much profit, while Bai Jing and Stranger are serious demon clan sword cultivators. Comrades, in the same way, if we learn Taoism and swordsmanship together in that desolate mountain, it is indeed a good thing. The old blind man nodded and said with a smile, "Girl Ning, let Gantang go to Luapa Mountain to be a mountain guard for worship, so consider it a congratulatory gift from me in advance." Gantang grimaced. It was really bad luck. So it was sold? Can it be the same thing as offering and serving as a bodyguard? The latter is connected to the luck on the mountain top of the dojo. The old blind man asked, "Fellow Taoist Gantang, it seems that you are not quite reconciled?" When Gantang heard that the other party called him Daoyu, he panicked. The old blind man sneered, "At least he is at the pinnacle of the Ascension realm. Taking an apprentice with him is like being a thief, so you don't have to panic." Gantang respectfully said, "Senior taught me the lesson." Fortunately, Ning Yao said with a smile, "You don't need to be a guardian of the mountain, there is no shortage of this on Luapa Mountain. Senior only needs to stay there for about 80 years, and when the door is opened you can go to Wuxia Xianxia to start a sect. Of course, if you are willing, Senior, going to Feishing City to get a job that only needs to be named, there is no problem, very welcome." Gan Tang sighed in relief. "It's meaningless if you don't start a sect. Wait until you do your best on the Luapa Mountain, then resign your identity and relieve your burden, and go wandering around the colorful world to be a friend with you. The uncontested mountain fairy will be enough. At most he will pick and choose along the way, and help this child you find a few more juniors." The old blind man saw that Ning Yao and Gan Ting had reached an agreement, So he added, Gontang, when you get to Aquarius Island, remember to pay more attention to my apprentice. Gontang was at a loss. Not long ago, Li Huai took that fox spirit down the mountain to visit a certain fairy. Ning Yao helped to introduce. His name is Li Huai, he is a Confucian disciple, and his hometown is in a small town near Luapa Mountain. He is a disciple carefully selected by grandfather of the temple. Touting is now Li Huai's guardian. Gontang sighed sincerely, this kid is so lucky to be able to worship Senior as his teacher. Yenner, a girl in a sable hat, tried to hold back a smile. She is very clear about the way master and apprentice get along, it's hard to say who is the grandpa and who is the grandson. The old blind man put his hand on Gontang's shoulder and said with a smile, what a blessing? You sound envious? If that's the case, why don't you just stay here and become my unnamed disciple? I don't recognize you. What a personal story, but you can call Li Huai your senior brother. The good thing about the pie falling from the sky is on your lips, open your mouth, do you want to eat it or not? Gontang couldn't stop laughing dryly, it was a statement of opinion. The old blind man ordered, Gontang, before going to Aquarius Island, you should help Li Huai protect the way for a while as a reward. If you provoke any 14th realm, if you can escape, come here. If you can't escape, you knowing that you will die, tell the other party that you are covered by me, and let the other party decide whether to kill you or not, and you are not willing to trade one life for another. Although Gontang had doubts in his heart, he wasn't sure that the old blind man could really kill a fellow monk, but the old blind man's verbal promise was really a piece of cake from the sky. Not daring to hesitate, Gontang hurriedly clasped his fists in thanks. Although the old blind man's eyes were hollow, he seemed to see through Gontang's thoughts. Do you think him talking big? It's not difficult to win a 14th level monk in a fight outside of 100,000 mountains, but it's not difficult to kill a 14th level monk. Difficult? Gontang didn't dare to deny it, so he really took the old blind man for blindness, so he had to bite the bullet and said truthfully, don't dare to lie to Senior, the fact that the 14th realm is difficult to entangle and difficult to kill has been recognized for thousands of years. The old blind man smiled and said, there are always exceptions. If you don't believe me when I ask your apprentice to burn paper on his grave, I will advise you to rest in peace, and then I will explain to you what the exception is. Gontang looked embarrassed and said, don't worry Senior, I won't have asylum, so I will just start a 14th level monk. The old blind man looked disdainful and said, after the rain, the sky clears, and the new 14th realm is full of water. Gontang dared not speak. The old blind man smiled and said, of course girl Ning is an exception. Ning Yao accepted it calmly. On the top of a high mountain, there are 2 14th level monks and 2 ascension level swordsmen standing at this moment. Of course, there is also the gloom of a golden core sword cultivator. When Yu left his hometown he was still a teenager, but now he looks like a young man, a head taller than Master's old deaf son. Yu naturally longed for the downcast mountain of the young hermit official for a long time. He has a completely different personality from his peer Du Shanin. In fact, he knew very well that Master was actually not very satisfied with him, because the Master occasionally looked at him with a bit of undisguised irritability and disgust. Yu doesn't have any resentment, she has mediocre aptitude and is slow in practicing swords, so she can't blame her Master for looking down on her. But if you want Master to simply abandon him, throw him in a random place and go his own way from now on, Yu is not that stupid, he dare not say such angry words. This trip to the 100,000 mountains with this result was a pleasant surprise and I was in a good mood. After wandering around for a few years I was finally going to see Lord Yingguan again. I even have a chance to become a member of the sect of Lord Yingguan? Ning Yao said with a smile. Your name is Yu. Qin Pingan often mentions you, saying that you are willing to endure hardships, have a good heart and recognize a good master. As long as you show the qualifications and perseverance recognized by the old deaf child, the old deaf child will not be a bad person. The stingy preacher is definitely willing to teach you everything, as long as you keep your feet on the ground and climb up step by step, your future achievements in the way of swordsmanship will definitely not be low. Yu looked cautious because he was not good at words by nature, so he didn't know how to answer. After all, the woman in front of him is Ning Yao. Gontang was very pleased to hear this. Ning Yao never said anything false, since she has said so, she must be right. I never thought that the Lord Yingguan knew my temper so well. Yes, the teaching of swordsmanship and Taoism by myself is what disciple Yu deserves, in every current state, not too much and never too little. In short, the disciple gets taken away from the master with real ability. Ning Yao looked at the magnificent scene of mountains beyond the mountains and took a deep breath. The old blind man said that he didn't welcome guests here, so he asked Gontang, master and apprentice, to go to the ferry immediately to find Li Huai. I believe that when Li Huai returns to his hometown, Luapa Mountain will have one more ascended sword cultivator named enshrined. When Gontang and Yu bid farewell and left, the two skittering sword lights added some color to the dead and desolate land. The old blind man asked, "Are you planning to go back to Howren?" Ning Yao nodded and said, "I'm back." The old blind man was silent for a moment and said, "Successfully reaching the 14th level is not a trivial matter. It is gratifying. Chen Qing has never doubted that you can become the 14th level, but it is estimated that even he did not expect this day to come so soon. If he to be able to see it with my own eyes, I guess I would laugh my off and I have to show off a few times on my side. There are only a handful of old friends, and even fewer old friends can be called friends." Ning Yao, when you ran away from home and traveled the world alone, Qin Qingdu actually arranged for a sword cultivator to follow you quietly. As for Nalin Yeshing or whoever it may be a foreign sword fairy who traveled to the Great Wall of Sword Qi. I don't know who it is, I'm too lazy to ask Qin Qing about this. He only said that the arrangement is relatively hidden, and he also said that he is not going to tell you about it. After all, Qin Qing is still worried that you will be wrong there or someone tricked me, but that unknown sword cultivator followed you back then, and stopped when he got near the Liju cave because Qin Qingdu let me take over. Back then when Ning Yao was in the Liju cave, he was in danger because of the mud legs that were born and raised in that town, and the old blind man almost wanted to make a move. If he doesn't make a move, Qin Qingdu will definitely make an exception and make a move, and it will be 2 times. Follow the rules no matter what your Confucian temple thinks. Of course, Qin Qingdu will definitely fight in Shirwanda Mountain. Ugly, you have a big temper. Ning Yao said. Qin Pingan said that the secret guardian, at first he guessed that it was Lu Ji who was born in Howren, but the timing didn't match up, and later he thought it was very likely to be the Sanxian from the Shenzhou of the Middle Earth, the sword cultivator. Jianghu, in the immortal realm, this person has always been lonely and wild, and his whereabouts are uncertain. The most famous thing about this sword fairy is that she has collected a considerable number of raising sword gourds. The old blind man had never heard of such a name before, so he wondered, how did that kid guess it? There is a record at the Summer Palace? Or is it that the sword cultivator surname Jiang is very famous in your Great Wall of Sword Qi? It's okay to say that Qin Pingan could guess Ning Yao's trip to Howren back then, and there was someone hiding and protecting her, but if Qin Pingan knew the roots of the guardians, the old blind man really didn't believe it. Qin Qing is relatively steady in doing things. Ning Yao narrowed his eyes and smiled. There are records in the Summer Palace, but she used a pseudonym at the time, so Qin Pingan will definitely not be able to find out the truth only by relying on this. Jiang Fu was withdrawn in the Great Wall of Sword Qi back then, and he didn't show his personality. Not Dewey, she didn't use the sword much, she was more like watching the battle. Jiang Fu didn't interact with many people, but she had a characteristic: she liked to drink. It can be said that she was addicted to alcohol, 3 drinks a day, unshakable when food. Before Qin Pingan left his hometown for the first time, he got a medium-quality Yangjian gourd from Wei Bo. At that time, Wei Bo said that this item was the inventory of the Dali dynasty. The sword gourd, the vermilion raised sword gourd, has the name Ginger Pot, which is a homonym for jianghu. Qin Pingan had been drinking at that time, so it was love at first sight, and he believed Wei Bo's vision, so there was no reason not to accept it. During several travels, Qin Pingan has always been more concerned about raising sword gourds, and Jiang Fu's unique accent in his hometown has always been indistinguishable from both the lake and the lake. In addition, Jiang Fu is a female sword fairy who secretly guards the way for me. It is indeed more appropriate. It is estimated that Jiang Fu stopped outside the Liju cave, and did not leave the Dali dynasty immediately, but kept hiding in the dark. When the situation became clear, she took the Yangjian gourd as a gift and found the way is to let the Dali Song family or the national teacher Cui Qin, with the help of the tiger Wei Bo, give it to Qin Pingan without showing any traces, and the sword-raising gourd is neither too expensive nor shabby, it is just right. The old blind man nodded. It's all about calculations. The frog at the bottom of the well jumped out of the well. It is not easy for Qin Pingan to get this far and smooth out the mess. Thinking of one incident, the old blind man warned, "It's only natural to pay off debts, girl Ning. Don't forget that you made a promise to the Long Zhanlong terrace at the foot of a certain statue in that fairy tomb. Pay it off early, don't delay." Ning Yao nodded and said, "Always pay attention, this time when I go back it will be settled." The old blind man rubbed his chin. What an unintentional bodhisattva was Nod. The mud-legged man obviously hasn't been to school for a day. It seems that at critical moments, There are always some words of blessing to the soul, which can teach others unexpectedly. Ning Yao said, I heard from Qin Pingan that it seems that there is a question and an answer recorded in the Buddha's lantern records. How can it be a clever use of a sentence and it will come naturally? The old blind man asked, Do you still remember the first time you met Zhao Yao? Ning Yao nodded and said, At that time, I only mistakenly thought that the schoolboy standing next to Mr. Qi was a young man who couldn't control his mouth. After Zhao Yao got a quarter of Bai Yes fairy sword Tai Bai, I just knowing that he was actually a sword cultivator long before he left his hometown, then what he said involuntarily and blurted out downstairs in the archway at that time, maybe there was some kind of traction with my natal flying sword? The old blind man said cheerfully, The truth is more complicated than this. Qin Pingan has such a good mind, why didn't he say a few words on your side? Ning Yao shook his head and said with a smile, Qin Pingan doesn't care to talk more about this nephew of the context. The old blind man said, According to the calculation based on a certain volt line in someone's mountain, you were supposed to have more intersections with sword repairer Zhao Yao in the Lizhu cave. If you can really get together, it belongs to Jian Qi. The Great Wall can also pinch its nose, a match made in heaven that is barely acceptable. One of the biggest opportunities on the town's 5 pillars, Zhao Yao's 5 elements are wood, is to finish the finishing touch to a certain paperweight, and you open one of them the way of flying swords is to open your eyes. If it weren't for the appearance of Qin Pingan, the foreigner who will go to the Great Wall of Sword Qi to make contributions in the future may be Zhao Yao, who first went to an overseas isolated island and learned swordsmanship with Bai Yi. The criminal officer Hao Suhui, leaving the customs, assumed the identity similar to that of the junior brother Qin Pingan, and helped Zhao Yao gain a firm foothold there. Ning Yao had a determined look in his eyes and said in a calm tone, If you make such an arrangement, you have to ask me whether Ning Yao agrees or not. On the night cruise ship, the criminal officer Hao Su, because he felt that he owed a great favor to the official Yin, really took the initiative to tell Qin Pingan about an extremely shocking inside story. The old blind man smiled and said, Why, I didn't like Zhao Yao the first time I met him, but did I like Qin Pingan the first time I saw him? If Qin Pingan didn't intervene, how could I guarantee that I wouldn't fall in love with Zhao Yao? Knocking and bumping to become a happy couple? Ning Yao said with a dark face, It's kind of disgusting. If someone listens to this, Zhao Yao will wait until he can't eat anymore. Thinking about it this way, she found it interesting again. The old blind man laughed out loud. It was rare for him to be in such a good mood besides his disciple Li Huai. Ning Yao said, Back in Nipping Lane before practicing boxing, Qin Pingan did a lot of things that only he can do today and said things that only he dared to say. I believe in him. Although with Qin Ping, Nanny Bai and even good friends like Dai Zhang, Ning Yao has always refused to admit to anyone that is between her and Qin Ping who likes who first, but Ning Yao knowing this, Yao really started to worry about it. It was true that she liked Qin Pingan earlier, and Qin Pingan, who is an elm lump about love between men and women, became enlightened later? The old blind man scratched his thin-haired head. Who said it? People who practice Taoism stay away from the world of mortals, live in seclusion in the mountains, love and hate together, and have distracting thoughts, and their Taoism will retreat. Ning Yao was non-committal. The old blind man said, Girl Ning, maybe you don't like to hear something. Qin Pingan wants to catch up with Chao Ci in martial arts. It is impossible. Ning Yao said, It is indeed extremely difficult to catch up with Chao Ci in martial arts, and the possibility is very slim. But Ning Yao quickly added, There is a year difference from childhood to age difference. The old blind man couldn't help laughing. Isn't this reason a little lame? Ning Yao said with a smile, In the wine shop, I don't know how many sword masters. I feel that what the second shopkeeper said is very reasonable. I really have a conscience. Every drunkard Jianxiu who drank in that small wine shop felt that this comforting words touched their hearts. One by one suddenly realized that our swordsmanship was no match for Go Ris. Let's go on the road together and Dong San will watch them because we are still young. Xie Go said that he would stay here for a few more days, and Ning Yao traveled alone with his sword. The sword light passed the gate without the sword energy of the Great Wall and the inverted mountain, and returned to Howran. The old blind man walked back to the house with his hands behind his back. Xie Go rubbed his sable hat and said, I've spent so much time thinking about it these days, but I still can't figure out which way of swordsmanship I should take. Do you have any good suggestions? The old blind man said, I asked the wrong person. I'm not a swordsman. Qin Qingdu is still there, you can ask him. Xie Go started to shake, waved his sleeves and muttered something. The old blind man couldn't help asking, What are you doing? Xie Go said solemnly, In the Howran market, We often see this kind of dance to summon souls and occasionally it works. The old blind man said angrily, "What's wrong?" Xiego made a lot of fuss but also felt bored, sickly followed the old blind man into the hall of the hut, found a bench and lay down, with a mink hat as a pillow, crossed his legs, dangling one foot slightly, lazily said, "Ji, I think you are very pitiful." For the first time in history the old blind man did not refute anything, but nodded and said, "Ching ching." Xiego let out a cry, "I thought you were going to get angry and drive people away, so I'm all ready to pack up and leave." The old blind man said to himself, "Cultivation comes and goes, what are you looking for? It's nothing more than the waves at the bottom of the boat, and the top of the mountain at your feet. But if you stop here it's not too strange." Xiego asked, "Then what do you think you should do when you are already in the 14th realm? Is it really strange?" The old blind man murmured, "One person builds bridges and builds roads and the rest of the people walk in peace." Outside the small temple the old man who cherishes writing squatted at the door, burned a basket of waste paper, and piled all the ashes in the brazier. Yu Shiwu, who had already remembered the predecessor, asked curiously, "Have you ever visited the blessed land of white paper?" Qin Pingan shook his head and said, "I've always wanted to go. When I returned to Howran, I was busy with my own family affairs. I never had a chance. I will be free later. I will be a shopkeeper again. During my trip to the divine continent of Middle-earth, I will definitely go and see it." Yu Shiwu frowned, "When can I restore my real appearance?" Qin Pingan joked, "Too small?" It's a pity that Yu Shiwu couldn't understand the meaning of the pun. "It's okay if I don't remember, but I've recovered my memory and I feel a little uncomfortable." Qin Ping just said something off topic. "It's almost dawn. Then they can wake up from the dream. When they wake up one by one, they will still retain most of the memories of their dreams. The overlapping of their memories in each life is actually the continuous superposition of 7 emotions and 6 desires. They used to look at each other in the Ma mansion with a deep courtyard and a strict hierarchy. Limited by their respective identities and visions, there are depths and shallows. Hiding a knife in a smile, being that sinister villain doing one thing in person, one thing in another's face, and that jealous, vulgar, arrogant shrew. Maybe it was difficult for them to really recognize who was with whom because of their respective identities and circumstances. The true thoughts of the people around you or even the people next to your pillow, but when you fall into a dream, all the subtleties of people's hearts, personality traits, things that you dare not think or do before, dare not say words that are not suitable, have a kind of feeling that can be fully understood. Letting go of hands and feet is useful, and the final result is that the dark side of all human beings is shaken out one by dreams, and there is nothing new under the sun. Qin Pingan started to set up the members of the Ma family and the outsiders in the house with a completely reversed status, so that the maids and handymen in the house became the masters of the house, and the pampered Ma family children in the house, the distinguished Qi practitioners as well as court guards who kept their income during droughts and floods and spent extravagant expenses, all became lowly servants. It is planned to gradually bring them together in a certain story, their respective joys and sorrows, love and hate entanglements, life and death, honor and disgrace, all gathered together one after another. It's like collecting a net to catch fish, driving all the fish in rivers, lakes, streams, ditches and pools in the mountains into a big net. The fantasy world of each background is a book of different thickness, so the mountain gods, emperors and generals, high-ranking officials and dignitaries in different stories, just like people of all colors, are all different. It was compressed into a book so that they could get along day and night, and finally look at each other when they wake up from a dream. Qin Pingan said, "Someone said that the degree of reality we perceive the world largely comes from the depth of memory." Yu Shiwu asked, "Who is this someone?" Qin Ping smiled and said, "It's far away from the sky but it's close to us." Yu Shiwu curiously asked a key question. To support the operation of these dreams, you must also ensure that you can deceive people. Not to mention energy-consuming, spiritual energy and immortal money, right? Qin Pingan gave a meaningful answer. "It's easy to say, anyway the fat and water don't flow to outsiders' fields." Yu Shiwu asked puzzledly, "It takes a lot of trouble, how does it benefit your practice?" Qin Pingan said, "It is necessary for their thoughts, words, subtle changes in facial expressions and eyes, and the behavior trajectories of being involved, driven, and finally put into action to make these fantasy worlds more fulfilling, and to make a small world more beautiful. 1,000 worlds becomes more real. Consciousness only people say that all dharmas come from the mind, and the mind produces all dharmas. No wonder you mention seeds and practice for no reason at the inn on the HD road. It turned out to be foreshadowing." At that time, I thought you were playing tricks to show off yourself as knowledge is overwhelming. The people in the Mafu who I pulled into the world of illusions are different from those local natives. The words and deeds of the former are all independent, not arranged or rigid. They just provide everyone with an invisible clay tablet carved with characters. As for the final life story, they are all walking on certain inherent roads, passers-by. Afterwards they will each pave new roads. And these roads, like the trees here, the predecessors planted the trees and the descendants enjoyed the shade. Why are you willing to tell me the truth? Because you are not the same as the Mafu Rincher, you belong to the kind of people who come and don't leave. In the front there is Manhuang Xiaoxing, and in the back there is the cook of Mafu, and Yushirwu is the third one, each of which has great uses. Yushirwu asked, "Is it so sure to trap me? Detain me here from the beginning to the end? Are you not afraid of being held accountable by Jianghu Mountain, or that the Confucian Temple will criticize this matter?" Qin Ping twitched the corners of his mouth and said sarcastically, "Why do smart people say stupid things on purpose? I don't believe you will accept your fate." The last time I met a similar person was the black-clothed scholar who was cut into 3 corpses by the little Tianjun Yangning in the Ghost Valley. Yushirwu fell silent, apparently still having doubts, but he didn't ask. Chen Pingan took the initiative to give a vague answer. Someone whose real name and identity is not suitable to be revealed for the time being. Previously at Tongyi's house, he gave me a punch of preaching favor, so I am willing to risk the world's displeasure. First give you half a fist back. Yushirwu asked, "What can I do?" Qin Pingan gave a more vague answer. "Here, the few of you, are the future roads and rivers, shade trees and fairies." Yushirwu asked tentatively, "Avenging the Ma family and his wife is just a way for you to hide the truth?" Qin Ping turned his head slowly and gave Yushirwu a cold look. Yushirwu was silent like a cicada. A Qi trainer of the upper 5 realms with a successful practice and almost flawless Taoism felt as if he had fallen into an ice cave. Using Ma Che and Ghost Scholar Glimpse as the introduction, Qin Pingan, as the god, began to officially intervene in the story trend of these fantasy realms. As the night fell, the old woman got up to open the door. Xuanhuan, a maidservant in green with a crown of white horns on her head, looked coldly at the bearded passerby who knocked on the door, looking like a hero with a big beard and a sword. As the maidservant around Ma Yueme, she was the most tenacious character. The ranger said straight to the point, "Self-righteous stubbornness is a double-edged sword." Xuanhuan sneered, "Is this the only thing Qin Jianxian has?" Qin Ping smiled and said, "I still read too little and my vision is too narrow." Xuanhuan said in a cold voice, "Admit it, you must admit it. In terms of learning, I am just a maidservant in the Ma family, and my status is humble. Of course, I am not as good as a talented disciple of a saint. Speaking of knowledge, I dare not compete with a young hermit. Officials on a par." The knife light suddenly shone, the woman's neck felt cold and a head was thrown high, and she could only hear the man's words in her ears. "Since I have accumulated grudges for a long time, I always hate my bad background. Aspirations to the sky cannot be achieved without luck. On the road of life, you must first meet noble people before you can make a fortune. Then I will give you some insight and experience that you can't even dream of, and let you see another destiny of yourself. Turn back, you can see for yourself whether this makes sense." Shenku, who was hunted down by hundreds of thousands of Shenku in the entire capital, has fallen into a dangerous situation of being gnawed by ants and elephants. Since the capital is folded like paper, the space for moving around is limited, and the geographical location is getting worse and worse. The more cramped, this made the old master, who was already the bottleneck of the golden body realm, to kill people until he vomited. After the killing, Shenku purely relied on his physical instincts to fight back. Taking the position where he was standing as the center of the circle, there are corpses all around, blood flowing and broken limbs everywhere, killing a river outside the palace into bright red. Fortunately, because those crazy Shenku are unarmed, Fan Su, who is proficient in martial arts, was still killed by him abruptly. He had to save himself at the same time because Shenku had to find someone, just because that Qin Jianxian said before leaving that there is no unparalleled road, so he gave him a hand. Shenku left behind a glimmer of life and told him the answer to the puzzle. As long as he finds the only existence in the capital who is not Shenku, as long as he kills this person, Shenku can escape from the predicament and see the light of day again. Shenku was exhausted halfway and was beaten to death. Everything had to start all over again. It is precisely because of this hope and thought that Shenku supported him to run around in the streets and alleys of the capital, the back alleys of wealthy families, government shops, brothels and dark kills, and even the people who squatted in the latrines. Xianxia, with the first time I saw the other person's appearance, I was afraid of passing by, and the chance of life in the distance was lost. In the end, I don't know how long it has passed. The scarred old master killed him in a rich and magnificent courtyard. Under a high golden canopy blowing in the wind, there is a woman in yellow clothes who looks like a palace. It seems that there is a suspicion of the rooster sitting in the morning. When Xianxia saw that woman's face, it was finally no longer his own face. He was filled with sorrow and joy for a moment, and almost burst into tears. He finally found the right owner. As for that woman's face, I vaguely remember the appearance of Xuanhuan, the maidservant of the Ma mansion, who taught her a few sword skills in the early years. How could Xianxia care about this? Xianxia threw away the broken saber with rolled blade in his hand, looked around and shouted with a hoarse cry, "Xianxian, I found it, I found it." The female emperor, who was about 30 years old, said sternly, "Rebellious ministers and traitors relying on martial arts dare to commit rebellious crimes, and they will be arrested before they are tied up, and they will be killed." Xianxia was stunned for a moment, and almost couldn't help but hold the knife again and chop off this girl with one blow. Enduring the severe pain all over his body, the old man raised his hand to wipe off the blood on his face. He didn't feel anything when he was tense before, but now he relaxed a little, and his liver and gallbladder trembled from the pain. Behind came out a pale old man wearing a blue robe, with a long snow-white beard that looked like an old man on the stage, hanging down like a waterfall hanging from a high cliff, fluttering like a fairy. Xianxia was overwhelmed with surprise, bursting into tears all of a sudden, and staggered forward a few steps. "Xianxian, according to the agreement." The old fairy stroked his beard and smiled. "Why do you take the deceitful words seriously?" I saw that the old immortal, who was respected by the empress as the teacher of the country, was obviously going to deny it. In an instant, with a flick of his sleeve, a long knife on the ground pierced a hole in Xianxia's chest. Xianxia fell to the ground and couldn't afford to die. The next moment he returned to the white jade bridge outside the palace. Xianxia stood up again, and countless Xianxias swarmed from all directions again. Xianxia was stunned and speechless. The ghosts who had been hitting the wall for countless years lingered in this cage, and finally saw a glimmer of light. In the end, it turned out to be a scam? He didn't even have the heart to swear a few words. Xianxia closed his eyes. He was really hit by that girl, stood where he was, waiting to die. In the courtyard, Empress Ma, who belonged to Empress Ma, who had usurped the throne after many years of listening to the government under the curtain, suddenly had a headache. The old real man smiled and said, "When you were 12 years old, I gave you an order for this. I remember telling you at that time that fame, fortune, wealth and glory are all things outside the body. It is a pity that when the world sees these, they risk their lives to seek them. It, when you get it, will taste like chewing wax. Of course you didn't believe it at the time. Now that you have become a female emperor that you can't even dream of, how is it like here? If there is a chance to start all over again, will you still agree to the draft and enter the palace, or will you follow the wandering Taoist priest? Cultivate the immortal law of pure heart and few desires on the mountain? Or make a private life with someone, run away from home, make your home around the world, roam the rivers and lakes and fight for righteousness? Or be an ordinary person with a stable life, open the door every day, chai rice oil salt sauce vinegar tea? Yes, I have been an emperor and I want to live forever. This is human nature. People who practice Taoism can see the real person, and they can see the real person. The get in the past depends on luck, and the get in the future depends on oneself. The same four characters, the word da, have two pronunciations, get and da. The old fairy smiled and said, "How many idiots can't see through it, but floating life is like water on the bottom of ice." When the last word of this fairy-like old fairy was finalized, in an instant, the woman seemed to see the bright moon in the sea, as if suddenly jumping out of the water, illuminating everything in the world like 1,000 hectares of glazed, high-branched sleeping crows, shoals. Herons silently. In a certain place on the official road outside Fuqing, that elite cavalry army violently killed people in broad daylight. None of the members of the martial arts school survived. The result was still killed in an instant, and there was no way to fight back. Many corpses have holes where arrows have been pulled out. It is estimated that the government officials are busy. Regarding this matter, how to report it is a big trouble that can make the prefect feel overwhelmed. In broad daylight, on the ghostly and gloomy road, Ma Chuan stared blankly at himself lying in a pool of blood. But looking at the dead man with a messy bun and a broken arm, the brothers came back to their senses for a long time, and looked at each other, not knowing where to go. I remembered the book said that when a person dies, there will be black and white impermanence or a bull-headed horse face to detain the soul. Go to Gemengwen, walk on Xuanhuan Road and drink Mingpa soup. I don't know if it is true or not. At this moment, the ghost Ma Chuan was the first to spot a young man dressed as a Taoist priest, and slowly walked around a horse that was lingering in place. The Taoist priest looked at him. He kept walking and kicked a knife on the road away with his toes. Seeing this, Ma Chuan couldn't help asking, "Are you a ghost too?" The young Taoist sneered and said indifferently, "I'm not the same as you, I'm a living person, but I've practiced some superficial methods of the immortal family, so I can see you lonely ghosts passing by." Ma Bai clenched his fists with both hands and said in grief and indignation, "Since the Taoist priest is a master of the Xian family, why did he pass by and refuse to save us?" Taoist Yunyu smiled and said, "The poor Taoist will admit his mistake and make amends with your brothers." A few words of sincere apology? I saw the Taoist slapped his head and actually pretended to apologize. Ma Bai was furious, his whole body was covered with faint black smoke, and his eyes couldn't help becoming fierce. He was about to rush up to tangle with the hard-hearted Taoist priest, but Ma Chuan reached out and grabbed his arm vigorously. Seeing this scene, the Taoist priest was not afraid at all, but sarcastically said, "Heaven and earth are divided into yin and yang, and humans and ghosts are on each side. The two meet by chance. According to the old saying, it is a kind of collision which is more taboo. The reason why poor Taoists are here, it's because my eyes were stained with some talisman water just now, and it's worth a few taels of silver when converted into the market price, so I can open my eyes to see you and other ghosts, in order to prevent evil spirits from causing trouble, and my obsession is too deep. Tao kills you now and there will be a sinister virtue around you." Ma Chuan said tremblingly, "It can be seen that the Taoist priest is not such a person." The young Taoist smiled and asked, "Want to become what the poor Taoist called a fierce ghost, so as to avenge this murderous man who caressing people's lives? Then the poor Taoist will pour cold water on you. Believe it or not, you guys from the Fuqing can't even enter the city gate? By luck, I slipped into the city gate, and then bypassed the inspection team of the city gods' temple's day and night tour gods. Regarded as filthy dirty things, I killed you on the spot." As soon as he mentioned the gangster, Ma Chuan gritted his teeth and said, "Master Dao, as long as we can avenge those beasts, we brothers are willing to pay any price." Ma Bai's face twisted and he said ferociously, "Beasts are not as good, they must be skinned and cramped, and their flesh and blood will be eaten." The Taoist looked playful and said slowly, "The reason why you didn't save yourself before was because you brought on this disaster yourself, and the gods can't save you who are only begging for death. If you saved you today, you can't say that you will still be dead tomorrow, a person who is not a party. Why bother to mess with the world of mortals? If you don't slaughter you to earn in virtue, you are already poor." The brother saw the Taoist priest raise his single palm in front of him, and silently recited a sentence of Fusha Wuyang Tianzuan. After that, after the two brothers knelt and kowtowed and pleaded bitterly, the Taoist priest put together all the dead bodies and buried them hastily. The Taoist priest followed the horseshoe marks on the path of the cavalry with two ghosts, and followed them all the way. The swordsman is indeed a master of the world, not panting, not blushing, walking like flying, faster than a galloping horse. The Ma brothers are glad that they are ghosts, and they can follow that strange man who claims to be down the mountain to experience the world of mortals. The Taoist stopped to rest during the period, took out the dry food from the package, took off the wine gourd around his waist, and sat on the side of the road drinking for himself. He used peanuts and pickles as the wine and vegetables. The dry food was hard to swallow, so he took a sip of wine to moisturize throat. The impetuous Ma Bai urged the Taoist priest several times to finish eating and hurry on the road, but the Taoist priest was leisurely, only saying that if he eats wine and does not eat vegetables, he must be drunk quickly. In the meantime, Ma Bai didn't notice that his elder brother looked at him, as if he remembered something and felt strange. Ma Chuan shook his head secretly, forgetting certain things. There is nothing wrong with pigs in the trough, and the distribution of spoils is uneven. Dogs eat dogs. The Taoist thought he was full enough to eat and drink, packed up the package and carried it across his body, patted his stomach lightly and asked with a casual smile, "Ghosts in the underworld are like people, people in the yang world are like ghosts. Ma Chuan and Ma Bai, you say that this world is strange, or not to blame?" The two brothers were dejected but kept silent. The Taoist smiled and said, "Anyway, idleness is idleness. It is better to teach people to fish than to teach them to fish. The poor Taoist taught you a technique suitable for ghost cultivation? The poor Taoist has business to do, so it is impossible to accompany you all the time. Hang out. But we made an appointment in advance. You only have the chance to kill one person for this revenge. Before deciding who to kill, you can find them one by one with the help of Pindao, understand their family background and identity, and finally discuss it. Pick someone to kill. During this period, if you dare to violate the agreement, Pindao has his own means to make you laugh hard. Success or failure, give me a sentence. Ma Chuan clasped his fists and said, "The Taoist priest is kind and virtuous, how can we repay him?" The Taoist said with a smile, "There is no need to repay. Remember that when you kill your enemies you must not be soft-hearted." Because the Taoist priests had a meal halfway, and they had to carefully bypass various temples, academies, and Taoist temples along the way, and at the same time, the Taoist priest had to teach them a magic technique of the immortal family. Itinerary, waited until the brothers separated from the Taoist priest, and then sneaked into the city with the help of the spell, only to learn that the real culprit was two from neighboring countries, who had returned home a long time ago. Afterwards, they went through untold hardships, faced danger several times, were in a desperate situation and almost ended up dying, and finally they found those two people. Ma Chuan looked at Ma Chuan, and Ma Bai looked at Ma Bai. They look at themselves. Almost simultaneously they recovered all their memories. The idle rich young man was walking towards him, carrying a bird in a cage and whistling, as if he wanted to catch some live food for the thrush in the cage. Brother Gongzi saw a young girl with a graceful figure and a flower basket, so he took a step sideways, just blocking the girl's path. Brother Young Master quickly apologized with a cheeky smile, and offered to step out of the way. Yushirwu asked, "Is he a child of the Ma family?" Qin Pingan shook his head, "It was just a market spirit." They came to the open-air drying yard full of sauce jars, and soon there were busy guys inside who raised their heads and said, "Master Qin is here." Qin Pingan smiled and nodded, and soon there was another familiar worker asked loudly, "Master Qin, is the sun so old?" Qin Pingan smiled and said nothing, and the boy Yushirwu sighed, "What is this all about?" Yushirwu is like a spectator who has just seen countless spectators with lantern riddles and lanterns on the 15th Lantern Festival, but has not been able to answer a few of the answers. What is the purpose of naming the town Tofu Pass? Qin Ping said with a smile, "According to the rules, riddles are expensive to solve, or there may be codes but no codes. Generally, lantern riddles are not allowed to be exposed." Yushirwu asked, "Just talk about the content related to lantern riddles. I roughly estimate that in the past 2,000 years, there are no less than thousands of people who have glanced at them. I'm very curious, very curious. Qin Pingan, where do you get so many? Can my knowledge be thrown into this world of dreams? How much effort and complicated learning would it take to make a successful, immortal, who has lived in the world for thousands of years without ever noticing something was wrong?" It sounds like a question that only laymen would ask. Qin Pingan shook his head and then asked back, "Have you heard of the night boat? Do you know that there is an entry city on it?" Yushirwu shook his head and said, "I don't like to inquire about these things. There are very few things in the mountains and I know very little." Does this mean that the family does not know the family and the monk does not know the family? Naturally, there is no comparison with you who travel far all the year round. You, the owner of the mountain, is used to going out to ask directions and going to the countryside to ask customs. Speaking of this, Yushirwu had a somewhat self-deprecating expression. In terms of travel experience in his 2,000 years, how have he seen less scenery and people, and how much have he remembered? Qin Ping smiled and said, "The mountains are tall and the trees are tall, the wells are deep and the water is cool. You don't have to compare this with me, Taoist you, each has its own strengths and weaknesses." In fact, Qin Pingan now has 12 extradition talismans in his hand. As long as one is sacrificed at the coastal boundary, he can help him board the night ship. Qin Pingan said, "Just talk about the lantern riddles. Actually, it couldn't be easier. You only need to have dozens of lantern riddle collections at hand. You just copy and copy. These books are not expensive. How much money did you spend?" Qin Pingan continued to explain, "Of course, it is really difficult to make what you see and hear reasonable. So I have already prepared large and small hundreds of categories, and a total of nearly 1,000 categories that have been extended. Thousands of notes are the kind of sticky notes that good readers like to put in the pages of books to build and enrich this false world, in order to prevent people like you who practice Taoism from entering it and feel fake at a glance. Back to the topic, there is an old saying that the rich celebrate the new year, and the poor pass the test. So I think the name Du Fuguan sounds more interesting, that's all." Yushirwu held back for a long time. "Is it a study heart formula that Xiaohu taught you? In the wealthy family at the foot of the mountain, There is a way to read when reading, and there is a secret to writing, which are often secrets that are never leaked. Qin Ping curled his lips. He doesn't teach this. He doesn't even bother to do it. Yu Shiwu asked suddenly, what if I catch a person and ask him hundreds of questions face to face? Qin Pingon couldn't help laughing and stretched out his thumb to Yu Shiwu. Then you really caught me. Yu Shiwu hesitated for a moment. One day, even if someone breaks the casserole and asks that person to the end, can his answer be seamless? Qin Pingon answered irrelevantly, let's take a look at another place? Yu Shiwu said helplessly, I have the final say? It's like visiting a famous garden and changing scenery step by step. Where the two of them settled down, the stream in the mountain was lively and noisy, and when it merged into a river outside the mountain, it became silent. One took out the freshly caught wild game in the mountains and said aloud market gossip and folk proverbs, relying on the mountains to eat, relying on the water to drink water, after all, relying on God to eat. The woodcutter looked up at the scorching sun, and said good times. The boatman echoed, money is hard to buy. May 5th drought, this year's harvest must be good. In the season when the flowers are bright and the willows are beautiful, dark clouds are covered in an instant, and a heavy rain comes and goes, and the flowers are all over the ground. There is an old man whose family is in decline and his evening scene is bleak. Holding a white paper lantern that has been used for many years, he sent the son of the traveling merchant to the door, and gave the remaining savings to the son, who said with certainty that he was going to start a big and stable business. The old man stood still and watched him go. He walked so far that he couldn't see his back before turning back to the house. The young man who had promised the old man that he would chop his hands if he gambled again, went straight to a smoky gambling shop in the city. A wealthy salt merchant in his 60s introduced his concubine to everyone, and he only said one thing, this is my family's thief. The young woman holding the old man's arms smiled prettily. It turns out that stealing is synonymous with stealing, and stealing is the same as concubine. It's better to say like this than Mrs. It was freezing cold, and a military parade was going on at the Dufugwan martial arts field. Yesterday, a son of the rich and powerful of the capital who came here to be gilded for a cut scene, turned out that the general who had always lived a simple life and managed the army well, deliberately woke up the aristocratic son from bed early in the morning, and came here for a military parade and stood with that general for an hour. The poor aristocratic son was so cold that his nose bubbled out. Take the aristocratic family to open a small stove. In fact, there is only a large bowl of white rice porridge on the table, and the pickled vegetables in wawatu. But even so, the Gaoyang boy who was used to fine clothes and fine food still made him gobble up in chopsticks like flying, feeling that he had never eaten so full and well in his life. I saw 3 schools successively with different situations. A master in a poor village school beat the naughty child with red and swollen hands. After school, the child dared not let his parents see him, otherwise he would definitely suffer another meal. In a school in a wealthy prefecture, the master shrank his neck from being scolded by parents who loved their children and scolded him. People ask for scolding in vain, and they can't say that they can't eat and hang up at the governor's side of the prefecture and county, so the ruler has been ashes for many years. In the private school of a certain scholarly family, an old pedantic teacher was hired. The child who had just started school was beaten badly that day. He ran to find his mother crying and complained. He ran in a panic on the way and fell down. There was a servant who wanted to help the child, but was stopped by a graceful woman, who just let the child get up immediately. Instead of comforting her, she taught her young son, walk safely, how could you fall? The woman asked her son why he was crying, but the child turned around and ran back to the school without saying a word, and sat down obediently for class. In the countryside, there are groups of young children who go to the stream to touch the snails together, and when they return home, they use the spines of the pangolin to pick out the snail meat at the dinner table, and there are also those who can taste the mountain delicacies with a single bite. There was also the woman who picked tea and sold it for money, and went to the market along the way. A pair of children who were still in school had brand new and neat clothes, shoes and socks the next day. Yu Shiwu turned his head and glanced at Qin Pingon. I saw Qin Pingon smiling and gentle. Yu Shiwu said to himself, the extravagant is rich enough, and the thrifty is poor enough. Yu Shiwu just followed Qin Pingon, as if spreading out a landscape painting again. They came to a rural cottage and it was snowing heavily outside, and they traveled together for the night. Here we chatted around the stove at night, with acquaintances, chatting freely over warm wine, drinking cheap earthen fire, but discussing how to persuade His Majesty the Emperor to return the title of the word. Outside the house, there were a few servants and attendants who looked like schoolboys. There was a young man who stuttered naturally, chatting with others, his words were like goat eggs popping out one by one. Beside him was a disheveled and slovenly man, standing sideways with a broom, dozing off, with several copies of Ganoderma lucidum around his waist. It is obviously unreasonable for a servant to have a Ganoderma lucidum hanging around his waist. Chen Ping came outside the house with Yu Shiwu and pointed to the stuttering boy and the sloppy man. Choose one at random to have a conversation and try to get to the bottom of it and see what the result is. Yu Shiwu thought for a while but still shook his head. Chen Pingan said, unless someone believes that it is an illusion world from the very beginning as a player in the game, he will not ask questions about the truth, let alone talk about speculation. Standing in the Dharma realm to see the world. Yu Shiwu whispered, it's like a dream, like an illusion, like a bubble, like a shadow, like dew, like electricity. Chen Pingan nodded slightly. The handsome young man who stuttered seemed to hear Yu Shiwu's high-pitched words, his eyes lit up suddenly, and he began to chant and sing a poem similar to xianxia, a typical Taoist language. The young man did not stutter at all, and his voice was as clear as a jade chime. Ordinary people don't believe in gods and they don't know that their heads hang in the sky. It is said that earth immortals can ascend to heaven, and they can live forever for thousands of years. When young people hear this, they are all jokes. If they fall to the ground without wings, it is rare to live in the world for 100 years. Strange people, looking at the world hand in hand, seeing life and death with eyes full of life and death follow like a shadow, life and death go hand in hand. The heart of death is terrified when seeing it, and it is frightened, and it raises its fist. Practicing the righteous Dharma for 3 to 5 years, the world, the sun and the moon are as soft as cotton. I chewed until the void was broken, and then I realized that xianxian is xianxian. With no doubts in my heart, I went to the market to teach the Dharma to find a young man, and I sang with him again. Please listen to it. It turns out that there are gods in the world. Happy God. Yu Shiwu laughed dumbfounded. Chen Pingan said suddenly, of course that gambler will lose everything. When he leaves the gambling stall, he walks down the street in a daze. When he sees a scene, he relies on his instinct and saves a man who was almost hit by a carriage without thinking. The child was saved and he himself died. The son of the aristocratic family who thought pickled vegetables and steamed cornbread was a delicacy in the world, later he generously sacrificed his life at a young age and died in battle. The Mrs. Rue, nicknamed the thief of the salt merchant, couldn't bear the loneliness. She first had an affair with the young groom at home, and then had a private meeting with the actor who was invited to sing at home. She wanted to elope with gold and silver, but she didn't know how trade-off. Those parents who are reluctant to let their children be punished because they don't study much, when their children grow up and their own children go to school, I'm afraid they don't know what a ruler is. Yu Shiwu patiently listened to the follow-up of more than a dozen stories of various characters. Some were unexpected and some were reasonable. Yu Shiwu had no reason to sigh. Absorb, disassemble, fill, reshape, transform and grow hair. Chen Pingan showed admiration. Fellow Taoist, you has finally reached the point of scratching the itch. Walking together and leaving the village hut, chatting while walking to the river and walking along the bank, Yu Shiwu actually felt that such a trip was not bad. The creators of heaven and earth are not without ingenuity, and the onlookers have a special feeling in their hearts. Fresh people and events that have never been seen are vivid in the eyes, and stories that have never been heard are heard in the ears. Yu Shiwu couldn't help sighing again. This trip has been very fruitful and I am grateful. A person who cultivates the Tao goes down the mountain to practice like a dragon walking around. Chen Ping put his arms around his sleeves, his thoughts drifted away, he came back to his senses and stomped his feet lightly. My senior brother Chui Chan seldom speaks human words on my side. But when he chatted at the top of the city back then, he had the truth is quite plain and simple. He said that a country where even local hooligans would subconsciously feel a little scared when they saw Mr. Shueshu on the road is a country with real hope. From strong to stronger. There is a lot of snow and the fairy in white rides a deer and wades in the water. Both the people and the scenery have an ancient flavor. Taking a closer look, Yu Shiwu had a strange look on his face, and that fairy was himself. One lie is silent, the sky and the earth are white, and you hold your breath and concentrate. If you ask yourself, it seems like your heart is like thunder. Yu Shiwu stopped in his tracks and asked for no reason, if everyone is willing to build bridges and build roads, is that true peace forever? Chen Pingan replied, I think it is true pure freedom, and everyone can freely transfer freedom. Sword of Coming Chapter 12:17. Chapter 12:17. Snow light. It rains continuously in the mountains, and the vegetation knows spring best. In the wine shop at the foot of the mountain that was renamed Jiao Mountain, Songwu, the goddess of the mountain who also had her name changed at the top of the mountain, used xuanhuan qi technique to overlook the capital of Yuxuan Kingdom. She no longer cares about worrying about Ma's fate. She is just worried that her Jiao Mountain is adjacent to the capital, and she is afraid of being affected. She just doesn't know how big a storm the previous group of people will cause in the capital, and is afraid that this kind of mountain will collapse and the ground will break up. When gods fight, both sides won't stop once they get started. The three drinkers who had taken shelter from the rain before, Lu Xianyang, the current leader of Longquan Sword Sect, Gu Ken, the direct descendant of Mr. Zheng in Beidasheng City, and Pei Qian, one of the four great masters of Aquarius continent, none of them had ever been thought of before. Dare to think of the top figures in the continent, regardless of identity and strength. Songwei is a female mountain after all, so she admires the young but famous Grandmaster Pei the most. If not for the incident in Yushengwa today, she would how happy would Songwei be to be able to drink in his own shop? Songwei sighed quietly, feeling envious of her fellow water gods nearby. At least they could stay away from the storm. She lifted the corners of her skirt, revealing a pair of embroidered shoes, and lamented that the golden statue in the mountain temple no longer had long legs. At this moment, an old man who looked like a farmer appeared out of thin air at the door. Songwei was so frightened that he knelt down and saluted on the spot. After all, this was the boss of his immediate boss, and there was a huge difference in status between the two parties. The visitor was none other than Xianxia Mountain Monarch. Tong Wenchang, who should now be honored as the divine monarch, took the lead in crossing the threshold with his hands behind his back and said, "We will not talk about official business today. There is no need to be restrained. We are just looking for a place to drink. You are the master. I'm a guest." Songwei was shocked and relieved and immediately relaxed his frown. With Tong Xinjun here, her little mountain god's temple must be worry-free. In the capital, Gu Ken used his magical power to shrink and left the palace in one step, and went straight to the vicinity of Qingtian prison. He did not say hello to the nominal maid, but just walked around the streets alone like a tourist. In a bookstore that sells rare books, he casually browsed through the books and chose a fairy book named after a certain person. He placed it in a prominent position for the shopkeeper. This kind of book was not popular in the market. Gu Ken flipped through it casually. The opening page is about how the immortals in the mountains cook several kinds of medicinal food. According to this book, the immortal family's mountain and wilderness cleansing is very mysterious. The food is refreshing and the meat is not fat. Light and agile. Over time, diners can be as light as a leaf, walk as fast as flying, and walk across mountains and rivers as if they are walking on flat ground. Gu Ken smiled and shook his head. Qi practitioners go to the mountains to practice Taoism. How can it be so simple to achieve the state of being light and lifting one's body? However, there is an annotation in the book that is quite good. It is equivalent to revealing the secret of heaven in one sentence. Ancient people made elixirs and collected medicines from all over the mountains and rivers. A charming woman walked into the shop slowly, staggered deliberately, twisted her waist and fell into Gu Ken's arms. Gu Ken didn't raise her head, but stretched out her hand to touch the woman's forehead, and then pushed her away. The bookseller on the side looked wide-eyed, never thinking that this customer who only wanted to see and buy was actually a gentleman. If it were him, he would also reach out to help her. In the panic, he could not guarantee where he would hold down the bowtie's delicate body. The woman stood up straight, covered her mouth and said with a sweet smile, "Is this trip safe for the young master?" Gu Ken ignored it and just asked the shopkeeper, "Does the shop sell the seal book of the 100-sword immortal?" The shopkeeper was confused and asked out of curiosity, "Who compiled it? Is it the original or a reprinted version?" Gu Ken smiled, put down the book in his hand, took Gu Lingyan out of the shop, and walked in a relatively quiet alley. He took a rough look at Gu Lingyan's harvest, put it all in his bag and gave him a neither high nor low rating, "All right." Gu Lingyan took out a square-inch object in the shape of a mountain ghost's money from his sleeve, and said with a smile, "There is also this." Gu Ken asked, "What?" Gu Lingyan said, "They are all old almanacs from different years and some are professional books related to almanacs. Counting is not my specialty. I got a headache just looking at them, so I packed them all in close proximity." Gu Ken separated a channel of consciousness and inspected the storage inside the money. After a few cursory glances, he only took out some thin booklets as if pinching the ends, and threw the square-inch object back to her. The rest of the almanacs, return them all to Qin Tianjian. Since ancient times, human dynasties have had rules for compiling and issuing almanacs. Some good people on the mountain like to collect almanacs from different dynasties and different years. However, what Guken left behind was only the legal calendar determined and compiled by his predecessors, and some accompanying corrections of the sun, moon and moon. He seemed not to be interested in the almanac. Seeing the unwilling expression on her face, Guken gave her a brief explanation. According to the popular saying, if you collect a year's worth of almanacs, your family will be repaid. Gu Lingyan blinked. What do you mean? Guken said, it's just that the house is prone to water leakage and fires. Gu Lingyan asked, real or false? Guken said, some things, it is better to believe that they are true than to believe that they are not true. There is no need to test the truth by yourself. Guken seemed to be in a good mood, and it was rare for Guken to say a few words to Xian Tian. If there is a flood disaster caused by a star change, the courts of various countries will request a whole set of Jiazi almanacs to implement a method of victory. So Qin, the place Tianjian used to store the almanacs of various dynasties, was very particular. For example, a certain character in the name of the library would usually be the radical of the word water, such as yuan, sui, jin, etc. She nodded like a chicken pecking at rice. Guken suddenly asked, where did this mountain ghost money come from? Gu Lingxian smiled sweetly and said, there are Xinjia ferry crossings and marketplaces in the wild world, okay? I'm not allowed to step on dog and pick it up. The purpose of mountain ghosts is to distinguish them from orthodox mountain gods. Ask the mountain ghost who has been blessed by the Taoist temple to spend money. It is regarded as a pure yang thing which can be used to house or hang. Even in the mountains, this kind of spending is very popular because there is no worry about it being easy to invite gods but difficult to send away, and it is very effective to use it to open a furnace in town. Guken said, it's worth some money, keep it well? Gu Lingyan asked, young master still hasn't decided on the location of the sect? Guken nodded, it's not a trivial matter. It's not urgent anyway. Let's look at a few more places. Gu Lingyan smiled and said, in the final analysis, the young master is just hesitant and undecided. He didn't hesitate to antagonize Lingfei Palace, but he also wanted to step in and buy the Hehuan mountain boundary, which was said to be Little Shujian Lake, from the Qingxing Kingdom's court. It's impossible for Guken to think that money is too hot to handle. In the final analysis, it was Guken who hesitated and had an impulse to do something to prove something to someone before choosing the Hehuan mountain area for the sect. But his reason told him that this choice was an idiotic move. Guken didn't want to talk to her about this, so her mind turned elsewhere and she laughed to herself. She asked curiously, did young master think of something interesting? Guken smiled and said, it's okay here in Aquarius Island. The news is not available so we don't know much. There are flowers inside the walls and fragrance outside the walls. In other places there are some interesting sayings. They all think that he comes from a scholarly family and has grown up since childhood. Just fill your stomach with poems and books. The reason is very interesting. Look at the hundreds of pages of music. How can it be common people's language? She covered her mouth and smiled. It was really funny. Guken continued, even if you know his general background and know that he is a mud-legged man, you still say that it is called a noble son from a poor family and a high official from a White House. It must be that Qinjun has made great contributions to the world at a young age. Guken wanted to laugh when he thought of these kind words. She said cautiously, if the Chinese Confucian temple hadn't deliberately concealed it, not to mention the honorific title of Qinjun, some people would have respectfully addressed it as Qinzi, right? Guken laughed it off. Sir, have you ever thought about what kind of person you must become in this life? Just think about who you don't want to be. Give me an example. Such as the embroidered pillows that you find useless. My young master, it's useless. You haven't tried it. It rained from the sky and flowed from the ground to the ground. There were fights at the head of the bed and at the end of the bed, haha. When they arrived at a place, seeing Guken stop walking, Gu Lingxian asked in confusion, Sir, what is this? Guken said, we are waiting for someone. We have arranged to meet here. Gu Lingyan became more and more curious. Is there an expert hiding in the palace? Guken said, there are not so many things to pick up. National Master Huang Lai is in the Golden Core realm. I roped him in to be the sect's worshipper. He is familiar with the customs of the mountain and the rules of the officialdom. He can help with some common affairs. Gu Lingyan asked, need it? Guken said, of course Baidi City doesn't need it, but my sect does. This is a scenic spot in the capital with a touch of fairy spirit. It is called Moon Mirror Pond and is home to various carps. People in the capital of Xuanhuan Kingdom have had the custom of releasing carps here since ancient times. A pavilion was built next to the pool, and an ancient mirror was hung on the forehead. The couplets were very mottled and old. The content was that there was no need to avoid the fish, shrimps, turtles and snakes. The light only illuminated the dragon. It is said that every moonlit night, the water here is particularly bright and clear, with sparkling waves. It seems that it is indeed true as the couplet says, and it is not a lie. Just now, Gukin did not enter the pavilion, but stopped at the entrance of a nearby Taoist temple. Mixed in the bustling city, it was a cold and unpopular temple, the kind that ordinary people would miss when passing by. Gu Lingyan looked at the small Qingjing Taoist temple. The door couplet here was also strange. There were elves and gods, but he didn't know who the melting caste was. It was more like the words in half a couplet. Gu Lingxian instantly understood. Could it be that together with the pavilion couplets they were called a couplet? In this way, Gu Lingyan took a long look at the deserted Taoist temple called Chongyang. Unfortunately, she was not familiar with the art of looking at qi and could not see any more ways. She doesn't take it seriously and doesn't care about people living in seclusion here to practice Taoism. First of all, the spiritual energy in the mind is thin, and what does it mean to be a Taoist? She herself is Yu Pu with excellent qualifications. Is there an immortal in there who can ascend to refine elixirs here? She turned her head and looked around, and there came a golden elixir earthly immortal who was not too young. Is he the owner of this Taoist temple? Gukin smiled and asked, is the handover completed? Huang Lai nodded and said, following your instructions I told Shui Pang the truth. When I heard it was you, I had a shit-eating expression on my face and didn't dare to say anything. Suddenly realizing that this metaphor seemed a bit inappropriate, the old man hurriedly smiled and said, I'm sorry for not using my words. Anyway, both parties are polite and it's easy to get together and part ways. Gukin said, you can speak freely from now on. Shui Pang can tolerate a national master who picks up lice and takes off his boots, but I am always slightly more generous than him. Huang Lai smiled and said, this is a good thing. When I came here, I was still struggling with whether I would be tricked by Sect Master Gu into the house and then turn my back and deny anyone. Gukin shook his head and said, you still don't know much about our Baidi city. The rumors from the outside world are spread by false rumors and cannot be accurate. In Baidi city, the native genealogy monks go out to do things, and their ways are relatively wild. The Shanzai cultivators who entered the city halfway are more disciplined. Huang Lai said cautiously, if I have the opportunity, I can go to Baidi city to see the lanterns. I only need to get a general view of it. I'm really curious and longing for it. I have been fascinated by it for a long time. Gukin said, the threshold of Baidi city will only get higher and higher in the future. This matter is indeed not easy, but it can be discussed. For example, we can wait until you reach the nascent soul realm. Gu Lingyan seemed to have just discovered that there was such a famous person. He smiled brightly and said in a strange way, oh, it's amazing, he is actually an old of golden elixir. Huang Lai laughed and said, so. Gukin glanced at her and reminded, speak like a human being. She obviously listened to the advice and she turned sideways and said a blessing, I'm so effective I've met my senior. I've only been with the master for a short time, and I don't understand the rules and etiquette. I kindly ask my senior to atone for my sins. Gukin introduced, she is now under the pseudonym Yingxian. She is from the Wild Demon clan and is in the Jade Pu realm. She has good qualifications. Huang Lai was not surprised at all. City Master Zheng, his master's apprentice, was not allowed to show off when he went out. It's just a personal maid who is at the Jade Purity realm, so there is no need to make a fuss. Thinking this way, Lao Jindan couldn't help but feel melancholy in his heart. This seemingly weak young woman in front of him was, after all, an unattainable Jade Pure realm. The key was that she came from the wild world. Huang Lai couldn't help but ask curiously, what kind of person is Master Qin? Just like Baidi City, the real scene inside is very different from the rumors outside? Gukin smiled and said, there is no need to use him repeatedly to beat me. Huang Lai's scalp tightened. I don't dare, Sect Master Gu has misunderstood. Gukin said, then try not to let me misunderstand. It wasn't until this moment that Huang Lai truly understood the unique style of behavior of the genealogy monks in Baidi City. Gu Lingyan smiled brightly. Gukin asked, where is this place? Huang Lai said with a smile, this place was once a family temple built by dignitaries who donated money. It was called Alchemy Temple in ancient times, but now it is called Chongyang. Gukin nodded and said, I saw that the weather here was good before. Of course, compared to the capital of your Yuxuan kingdom, it is called Alchemy Temple? No wonder I think this is a good place for alchemy. I changed the name well. I guess it is an expert. The first to get the moon is near the water tower. The predecessors deliberately chose this place. There is no doubt that the water elixir is refined here. If it is named Chongyang, it will gain a little bit. The giant prong is molten, the golden furnace is golden, the purple light is gradually emitting, and the red energy is deep. I guess a so-called land will appear in the future. As for how long it will take in the future, whether it will be decades or hundreds of years, I am a layman in the art of gazing, so I don't know. The art of looking at the qi is different from the ordinary magic and magical powers of the immortal family. It is also different from the so-called clairvoyance, feat and magical functions. This method is similar to a talisman, and the threshold is quite high. It pays attention to the talent and foundation of the Taoist. The success or failure seems not to be determined by human power, but by destiny. Only the gods of mountains and rivers who are not canonized by the imperial court can immediately master this method by shaping their golden bodies and erecting temples. In addition to the imperial guards of various countries, there are also those strange people and fortune-tellers who travel all over the world. Huang Lai said, Go in and ask for a cup of tea? Gukin shook his head and said, Go somewhere else for a stroll. It doesn't matter where you go. The vast world of mortals infects the human body, and the melting furnace of heaven and earth forges the alchemy elixir. People in the world say that gods are good, and a golden elixir can guarantee immortality. If you don't know how difficult it is to practice Taoism, your heart may turn into ashes. Stopping along the way, I looked at the willow color with sadness, which grew deeper and deeper with the spring. In the world of Qin Pingan's heart. On the top of the city, standing behind Ma Xuanhuan, Zhou looked like a goddess in the temple of obscenity among the mountains and rivers, with a shining golden body and a calm smile, as if he had just said goodbye. Although he knew it must be false, Qin Pingan was still in a weird mood, frowned and asked, How did you do it? Old god Ma Xuanhuan said, Calling the soul. Ma Xuanhuan's eyes were hot, as if there was a huge riddle for Qin Pingan to solve. Don't you always have a good memory? In the past, such things did not often happen near Xinghua Lane and Clay Vase Lane. Have you forgotten? When the children were frightened and lost their souls, their parents would lead them through the streets and in the wilds, calling their names all the way to help the wandering souls return home. There are so many ancestral crafts in the world that have been lost. I'm just reinventing them. I just picked it up. What is the effect? Are you shocked? It can make Qingyuan Qinjianxian, who is accustomed to the big world, feel so fearful. It is not in vain that I have put so much effort into it. Qin Pingan asked, Have you thought about the consequences? The resonance between heaven and man that monks in the world cherish is all about the resonance between man and heaven and earth. Aren't you, Ma Xuanhuan, afraid that Zaiqian Zhoumi, who occupies the former side of heaven, will be connected with the human world? Separate and descend to the earth? Give birth to a contingency? Especially at this critical moment when the founders of these three religions have dispersed. Ma Xuanhuan felt like he had heard the funniest joke. You have already come to kill me, and you still advise me not to break the jar? Why should I keep this kind of trump card? I can use it when I go to the grave to worship my ancestors next year? Qin Pingan was silent. Ma Xuanhuan stared at the guy who had held a grudge for so many years and said in a deep voice, Now I give you two choices, either you quit the Ma family immediately and wipe out the old grudges, and I will also persuade them to stop enjoying incense sacrifices. The idea of achieving immortality in Shinto will cause your body to age day by day, and you will die at the end of your life. Or in order to avenge your own personal revenge, you will not hesitate to risk dragging the entire world into the whirlpool and become my enemy. Of course, just with this risk, but I didn't say that the person who came from behind must be so capable that he could cause harm to the world. You can bet. Qin Pingan said, You have misunderstood. What I call consequences has little to do with this world. I am better at starting from scratch and cleaning up messes like a swallow holding mud. I'm talking about you. You want to do this next year. On Qingming Festival, Ma Yenshan and Ma Yueme, how many glasses of wine would you like to toast to your brother, whom they regard as the pillar of the family? Goddess Ma of Xinghua Lane, you have been kind to me in delivering my baby. Your grandma cannot miss the old days, but I want to miss this one. Love, in the final analysis, although it is a business, one of the many businesses she has done, I once heard someone say when I was young that when my mother gave birth to me, The process was not easy and quite dangerous, so when my father was invited, he left the original Baoshi kiln and went to your kiln to become a master of porcelain and apprentices. It was because he remembered this kindness. The Ma family of Xinghua Lane has the Ma family of Xinghua Lane. Tutor, our Mu Ping Lane Xin family also has our appointment. When the courtyard is empty, chairs can be gathered together? Ma Kuxuan was silent for a moment and said, "Then you are mistaken. I don't think about avenging them one day just because they gave birth to me. I just want to repay my kindness and repay this debt, so I just follow they are settled." So you come to seek revenge. This is a deadlock between us. Why did I earn that bag of money when I was a teenager and deliberately leak the news that you and Ningyao were hiding in the immortal tomb? Could it be that I would covet that little gold? Fine copper coins? Why do I clearly think that you and I are fellow travelers and that everyone of the same age in Liju Cave Sky looks at you the most? But I want to deliberately aggravate the cause and effect of both parties, just so that you and I can meet one day and know life and death as soon as possible. Don't if you are just a little sloppy, no matter who dies, you can settle the grievances between the two families together. As a result, your performance today makes me very. Ma Kuxuan paused briefly before slowly saying two words, disappointed. Qin Pingan said, "Ma Kuxuan, it's not me who is struggling but you, because you have never recognized and accepted your own roots. Deep in your heart, you hate your own clear origins and you can't see tomorrow. Destiny, that's why you became your only friend with Yu Shiwu, who was in the same situation. Neither accepting where you came from nor finding your whereabouts, you became a rootless duckweed in this world. Since you were wrong yesterday, you will do more wrong tomorrow. So you have been waiting for today." Having said this, Qin Pingan took a deep breath, laughed and rolled up his sleeves. "I know this feeling because I have walked through this myself. You are right, we are indeed on the same journey, at least on the same path in life. There's a long way to go and it's all the same." Ma Kuxuan said, "It's a pity that we are not destined to be friends. Let's go all out and let the long-awaited today be happy. Don't become the kind of Xianxia wine in your wine shop. Whoever drinks it frowns, I drink it. However, I still found someone to bring 2 pots with me, it was too cheating." Qin Pingan smiled and said, "This kind of thing is not coming from someone who loves to drink. Drinking depends on the place. In the wine shop, you only need to take out a piece of snow to spend, pay with one hand and deliver the goods and drink on the spot. After finishing it, I found a friend to help me and I walked from the Great Wall of Swordchi to Daoxian Mountain, brought it to Aquarius Island, and delivered it to you in Jinwu Mountain. Can the same drink have the same taste? What you are expecting is not a snowflake. The taste of money." Ma Kuxuan asked with a smile, "Why are you so interested in talking all of a sudden?" Qin Pingan pointed to the Zhoumi, who was more than 2 feet tall. "Aren't you trying to see how long this dear friend can last? You are in the immortal realm now. If you invite an illusion from the 14th realm, you will definitely not want to follow me. If you waste half a sentence, then I can avoid fighting and postpone it. If you are a thug with an Ascension Realm cultivation level with your temper and face, you can at most bite the bullet and talk for a few words, and you will interrupt me and I will do the same. It seems that you are good at fighting and retreating. Now it seems that at most it is a fake Ascension. In the Immortal Realm there are some tricks of the Ascension Realm. You can light a stick of incense and descend to the real world in person. The duration is quite long, so you only have the slightest chance. Not urgent?" Ma Kuxuan clicked his tongue and said, "As expected of a sword cultivator, he is really cheap." A heavy snow fell in the sky, and the snowflakes were so dense that it was unclear whether they were falling from the sky or rising. Ma Kuxuan heard that sword cultivators on the Great Wall of Sword Chi, regardless of their level of realm, would not have a grave after death, so naturally there would be no custom of worshipping ancestors. In this snow, the city head is like a tomb, and the endless snowflakes are like countless white paper money scattered to pay homage to the heroic spirits. People become ancient people and the earth becomes relics. All gone. Ma Kuxuan smiled brightly and shouted, "Qin Pingan." Qin Pingan asked doubtfully, "Huh?" In an instant, visions arose, and the entire sky condensed into a thunder pool, with a mighty sound, like a great monk in seclusion leading to a catastrophe. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning as thick as a mountain peak separated from it, and turned several times in mid-air. The straight line instantly became more condensed and slender, and the Taoist charm contained in it was even more amazing, like a golden flying sword hitting Qin Pingan. When the golden thunder was about to hit Qin Pingan's head, there was a shaking sound near the thunder pool in the sky. Qin Pingan didn't know whether he had no way to hide or wanted to weigh the weight of this sky thunder, but he didn't move. Punched upwards and handed it out hard, the tip, of the sword exploded with a bang, and countless golden sparks burst out within 100 feet, making Qin Pingan feel like he was in a firehouse where swords were forged. But this sword, or a thunder from the sky, is no less powerful than a full-strength strike from a Jade Pu realm swordsman. But Ma Kuxuan didn't use a trace of spiritual energy at all. There was no talisman in his hand to drive him, and there was no need to recite a spell to induce thunder. There were 5 colors of thunder in total, which coincided with the cycle of the 5 elements. They were constantly differentiated in the thunder pool, and fell on the city head one after another without giving Qin Pingan a chance to breathe. 5 thunders striking the top is a Taoist term. Because it is too powerful and deeply rooted in people's hearts, the common people in the city as well as the green forest heroes in the rivers and lakes, always like to say that if they violate their oath, the shadow of the cloud above their head will appear and 5 thunders will strike from the sky. Ma Kuxuan had already contracted his earth veins and moved to another place, far away from the battlefield. He smiled and said, "Thousands of magic techniques in the world are mastered by Qi practitioners, but magical powers are my family's business." After resisting dozens of thunderbolts, Qin Pingan's fists were bloody, and his bones were visible. His whole arm was numb and he had to shake his arm. A long string of electric lights was still entangled around his arm, like a dozen snow-white electric snakes being killed by Qin Pingan. He shook to the ground. Qin Pingan was a little surprised. Why didn't Ma Kuxuan take the opportunity to throw out a few more thunder magic powers? In the previous words, when talking about the Xianxia mansion in Longhu Mountain, Ma Kuxuan seemed to be arrogant. He did not think highly of the 5 thunder methods of the Xianxia mansion, and even felt that he was qualified to teach Zhao Tianlai the true meaning of the thunder method. Ma Kuxuan, no matter how high-minded Kuxuan was, he did not feel that he was superior to Zhao Tianlai in terms of magical attainments. It was just that Ma Kuxuan was a reincarnation of the gods and was from the lay department of the ancient heaven. He regarded himself as the authentic sect of thunder methods, so there was no problem. Ma Kuxuan said with a smile, "I didn't even give you a chance to breathe. I'm so generous, but I want to take the opportunity to sharpen my fist skills and temper my body. You 10-level warriors are really amazing. I envy you to the extreme." As he spoke, the Thunder Pond heavenly tribulation was getting deeper and deeper, overwhelming and suffocating. The vast Thunder Pond that had accumulated countless ancient Taoist meanings was like a deep pool filled with water. Ma Kuxuan used his great magical power to separate a ditch and lead it to Qin Pingan. It creates a pattern that looks like the mouth of a well is poured with river water. In one go, thunder and lightning with Taoism as thick as liquid because the thunder fell too frequently, the thunder was connected continuously, and the sound of thunder with slight intervals turned into continuous rolling thunder, just like a beating a drum in the clouds, and someone touching the ear it stuck to the drum surface. Not to mention Qin Pingan, who was in the game, was so shocked that Ma Kuxuan felt a little tight in his chest. He stretched out his hand, gently rubbed his ears and sneered, "The illusion of the heart is ultimately a fake." It turns out that a great wall of sword chi has been shattered by hundreds of lightning strikes. The bright red mustard figure stands in the ruins, continuing to bear the catastrophe with both fists. With each punch delivered, there are hundreds of millions of people around it. The magnificent scene of thousands of fires and splendid scenes, it is hard to tell whether it is a sea of fire or a vast array of stars in the endless void. Do you still dare to say that you only use martial arts to fight against the enemy? Are you really not going to use shrinking techniques and sword escape techniques? I would like to see how long Grandmaster Jije's pure chi can last. According to Ma Kuxuan's calculations, when Qin Pingan takes a breath, before the old and new energies are connected, he will be rewarded with another magic hand. For Taoist monks, the human body is originally a blessed land, and the flesh, blood, muscles and bones are the mountains and rivers. The so-called practice is to use a bridge of immortality to connect to the cave and sky, and temper the spiritual energy inside. The Buddhist saying that human life is rare is never false. All sentient beings in the world regard humans as the leader of all spirits, so why do all the enlightened monsters on the earth strive to be refined into human bodies? Naturally, it is profitable. With a human body, cultivating Taoism can achieve twice the result with half the effort. To put it simply, in a sense, the human race is a free spirit. The scale of this heavenly tribulation thunder pond can theoretically completely suppress a Jade Pu realm sword cultivator, kill him, and turn him into powder. Even his soul will be wiped out. There is no need to talk about the afterlife. Even if the great monks on the top of the mountain can enter and leave the underworld in Fengdu, they will still be in vain if they want to save the situation. With this unique magical power, Ma Kexuan's manpower is already the ultimate in killing you Pu or seriously injuring an immortal. Once he asks for more, even if it is just the slightest, Ma Kexuan must pay in a strictly reciprocal and uncompromising manner. At the price of the difference, you step into the divine way, return to the throne of God, and become a god. And this trend is irreversible. Therefore, if he goes a step further and steals a little more of the secrets of heaven, Ma Kexuan will completely abandon the 7 emotions and 6 desires, no longer bound by cause and effect, even if he can preserve the memory of this life. So this is a paradox. If you want to use more divine ways to help yourself with great magical powers and be able to kill an immortal with a crushing posture, Ma Kexuan will no longer be Ma Kexuan. Now that this road has come to an end for the time being, Ma Kexuan prepared several gifts for Qin Pingan on another road as a way to entertain guests. At the bottom of the collapse, golden thunder and lightning were swaying wildly in the flying snow. When the manpower was finally exhausted, the powerful fist power of the owner in the bright red robe showed no sign of weakening. Is it possible that Qin Pingan can really eat all the thunder pools in one go? Ma Kexuan asked curiously, are all Jijia warriors so powerful? Regarding the practice of joints, Ma Kexuan is an expert and has a very high vision. However, he has never been involved in martial arts and knows very little about it. Zhou on the side replied, because he is at the Qixing level which no one has ever seen before, and is uniquely blessed to be able to carry it for a longer period of time. Ma Kexuan twitched his lips and said, if you have the ability, just endure it. Will be a good thing. Zhou is non-committal. Ma Kexuan laughed loudly and slapped his knee. When we get out of trouble later, this guy will definitely complain to me, your methods are too mean. Right? Zhou reminded, we are in the formation, it's a little early to be happy now. After all, this barbarian Xuanhuan who was invited by Ma Kexuan to support him was an existence that Ma Kexuan visualized using the ancient secret method and then forged in the furnace. It was equivalent to using the 12 ancient high-ranking gods at the same time. The two's natal magical powers are far beyond the comparison of ordinary puppets. It was named by Ma Kexuan after calling soul, which is a secret contract with heaven, which is not bad at all. Zhou smiled and said, people strive for a breath and gods receive a stick of incense. It really suits the occasion. On the ground, Qin Pingan's boxing technique was so simple that he had almost no moves at all, and he was out of his ordinary. The peak of the fist intention is even more vast, like a who is not subject to incense, breaking the shackles and walking in the world. Ma Kexuan's face was gleaming in the golden light and snow. He stared intently at the battlefield where he seemed to be an invincible warrior who faced only the sky. There are thousands of spells on the mountain which are dazzling. They are beautiful to look at, but in Ma Kexuan's eyes, it seems that after all, it is not as satisfying as relying on his fists alone. It's a pity that when he approached Yushirwu, he had some intentions at first, but in the end he couldn't bear to take action against this friend, so he came out to occupy the magpie's nest and resurrect the soul through the dead body. Ma Kexuan couldn't help but sigh, what a monster. Zhou said, compared to Ascension Realm monks, there are only a few warriors of the same generation who can reach the first level of God. They have fewer opportunities to compete with each other, and the number of punches is even less. Ma Kexuan said, if you put yourself in his shoes, even if the combat power on paper is equivalent, facing this thunder pool, I wouldn't be able to walk so casually like him. Zhou said, it's calm. The existence of heavenly calamity is not only a past that practitioners regard as dangerous, but also a fate that cannot be escaped. The dangers and horrors among them can only be known by those monks in history who had no choice but to fight and die because they could not escape the disaster. In addition, there is a deeper truth. The existence of a heavenly calamity can reduce merit and cause and effect in the world. If one is not good at studying Taoism and ends up in a situation where the body dies and Taoism disappears, it is just a matter of returning the property to the Lord. However, if one successfully overcomes the tribulation, it is the benefit of the Taoism. It can help the Taoist people to escape the tribulation. The Taoist heart will be clear and the Taoist body will not be broken. Stained in the world of mortals, otherwise why would those who have attained the Tao preach the secrets of heaven with great earnestness and sincerity, emphasizing that one must wait until the merits are perfected before he can attain the Tao and then have the opportunity to attain immortality. But if we say that the heavenly tribulation is man-made, there is a huge difference. If you are not careful, you will be struck by the 5 thunders of the heavenly tribulation, cutting off the 3 flowers on your head, and destroying the 5 human qi that were finally condensed. What Ma Xuanhuan wants to do is to make the young hermit official and the owner of Luolu Mountain, who has done many feats, have all his merits and deeds cut off, and lose some kind of protection from God's will. This move can reverse the situation and make Qin Pingan temporarily lose his time. Regardless of whether you rely on flying swords or other means, here you are mainly against the guests. I will follow the same pattern and mainly against the guests. In addition, Ma Xuanhuan has more magical effects. Ma Xuanhuan looked at that guy intently and murmured to himself, I want to cut off all your merits. I don't want it to last forever, just for a short time. When a person's merits are gone, he becomes a bad guy with bad luck. As the old saying goes, people with strong luck can deceive ghosts, and ghosts with bad luck can deceive others. This is the truth. Why would the gods of mountains and rivers in this world be willing to pay homage to someone passing by? Or show up to greet him or protect him secretly? Why does the Xuanhuan temple in this world have a single booklet with names recorded in Jubi? Everything is due to the ancient times. There have been some changes in the ritual system. Among them there is a new heaven rule. Qi practitioners and mountain and water gods, who have meritorious deeds for the people, will be added to the law. Merits in the world are divided into yin and yang. What is yin virtue? It's like ringing in the ears, which is heard only by oneself but not by others. There is often an admonition that it is better to cultivate virtue than to gain wealth and fame. The word, zhong, reveals the secret of heaven again, and the heart is the field of blessing. The fields are barren, the water sources are drying up, and there is no talk of next year's harvest. This is not an empty talk to deceive people and do good things. It only talks about a certain lineage of Taoism. It is extremely strict to accept disciples and preach. Why does it require the disciples to have 3,000 merits and 800 good deeds? People have the heart to follow the Tao, the ambition to become an immortal, and the wish to reach the sky, but they still cannot understand the fate of right and wrong. The common man meets noble people in the market and on the road of life, and never misses them. What is a good person also needs to pay a price. Qin Pingan nodded and smiled. I like to hear this. Turns out you are not bragging. You are worthy of being a confidant. Ma Xuanhuan pointed at Qin Pingan's shoulder. Every master is carrying a ghost on his back. I'm just manifesting it. You have enough merit before, so of course you won't notice this weirdness. There is often a saying in the market that people who lack yang qi will have a cold neck and a cold back. There's something behind you. I don't know if it's a human or a ghost, right? Those who have gone through the world of martial arts and have stained their hands with countless blood may have strong bones and strong evil spirits at the moment, but it doesn't matter. When they get old and weak and their spirit is weak, let's see what the situation is like. Oh, why do people who are in the world of rivers and lakes keep saying that it will not bring harm to their families? I want to wash my hands in a golden basin. Why are officials most afraid of being implicated in having their homes confiscated? This is because they are afraid of the consequences without knowing the cause. Those who died directly by your hands, those who died indirectly because of you, those who stopped at Shujian Lake on the way, those who are permanently stationed in this great sword Qi wall, no matter they deserve to die, died in vain. Humans, ghosts, the demon clan gods are all on your back now anyway. Qin Pingan was indeed pressed to the point where his knees were slightly bent and his body was stooped, showing an overwhelmed posture. This was by no means a lie. Ma Xuanhuan asked with a smile, have you ever seen with your own eyes the pain of climbing over mountains in the profession of porter? It's the kind of coolie who carries luggage and snakes along the mountain with the road. I think you are similar to them now. Qin Pingan asked calmly, have you ever seen a woman carrying her husband? Ma Xuanhuan was stunned. Qin Pingan said, I have seen it. Do you know how they use bamboo shoot shells? Ma Xuanhuan was speechless and sighed, let me bite the bullet and temper my temper. It's rare for me to say a human word. Qin Pingan, you shouldn't take the suffering of others in this world so seriously. Zhomi reminded, don't delay. Ma Xuanhuan nodded, then continue and gather 3 axes. Qin Pingan, who was wearing a bright red robe, stretched out a palm, apparently signaling Ma Xuanhuan to be polite and just let the horse come over. Na Zhomi's expression suddenly changed slightly. Ma Xuanhuan asked doubtfully, can't it be shaped? There was a monk from the 14th realm who had no idea and helped Qin Pingan set up some kind of amulet early? Zhomi shook his head and said, it needs to be weirder. First use human power to create heavenly calamities, and then use secret methods to show cause and effect. What next? Are we going to imitate the inner demons of Taoists? Qin Pingan sneered and said, "If this is really the case as I expected, then your 3-axe attack is really extraordinary. Ordinary immortals may not be able to withstand it." Even before Ma Kuxuan made a move, the immortals who were fighting against him were probably already dead or injured. The originally dark sky opened a thin line, a hole was opened, and with a flash of golden light, a bright sword light fell straight down. The point of the sword is nowhere else. It was Qin Pingan. Don't kill others, only kill yourself. The bright red robe on his body had fallen off on its own, and he was one step ahead and swept away to another place. A man wearing a green shirt and carrying a sword walked out of Ma's ancestral hall and came to this world. Finally we meet. Standing there, spreading his hands, the bright red robe was put on by itself. Qin Pingan smiled and said, "It's not easy, you can actually force me to reveal my true body to meet you here." You're tuning in to the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.